tell, then you see the road. I'm out to my soul into the size whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect. Do it. All of that green together, the truth, yeah. Tell you the
Hello and welcome back to Cypherfics, guys. We are happy to have you back with us today in brand new part 2 of What If Harry Potter Meets the Power Rangers. Make sure to like, share, subscribe and also press the bell icon so that you never miss a great update. Also make sure to check out the wonderful author 10star12 on fanfiction.net. Well, let's continue with the story now.
Shortly after their conversation on the nature of Harry's magic, the Rangers had left to go back to the carnival. Apparently, despite the fact that it was largely run by Rita's putties, it was still going to continue through the end of the next day even without their presence. On top of that, Trini needed to get back to her cousin, Sylvia. They had, however, been thoughtful enough to acquire a food supply for Harry. It wasn't anything more than a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter with some plastic cutlery and bottled water, but Harry had certainly survived on less during his time at the Dursleys. It honestly wasn't terribly bad for such short notice, even if it was about as limited of a selection as it was possible to have, but Harry appreciated the thought all the same. In lieu of anything else to do, Harry had shuffled his way into his room and started transfiguring his furnishings. In the end, he had a small desk and chair along with a trunk all transfigured from stone teleported in by Alpha. He then brought the cot he had now woken on twice into his room. It was surprisingly comfortable, all things accounted for. After packing the cloak of invisibility and his pilfered vine into his new trunk, placing the vine under a stasis charm to keep it from degrading, it had been a simple matter of transfiguring his clothing and closing his eyes before he fell asleep. Upon waking the next day, well into the afternoon as it turned out, Harry found himself with very little to do with himself. After spending a fruitless and frustrating hour trying to remove the goblin charms from one of his galleons, Harry turned to the main room of the command center to occupy himself. One would have thought that with all the technological wonders within the building there would be plenty to do and learn, however in reality that was almost entirely the opposite of the truth. As it turned out, the majority of the consoles had no displays to coordinate with them. In order to use them you either had to be a robot like Alpha who had a direct link to the computers and so was able to immediately interpret all the data passing through them, or have a genius-level IQ and near photographic memory like Billy, who was able to remember how to use everything and what each button did or be able to infer their functions with relatively little difficulty. Since Harry was neither, he would need to look elsewhere to cure his boredom. Alpha could have certainly tried to teach Harry how to use the computers, but the robot was still rather busy trying to create Harry's identity in this dimension. Since Harry knew this was a far more delicate and important activity than entertaining him, he left Alpha to his work. Another option would be for Harry to spend some time outside the command center, hiking in the mountains that it was hidden in. The only problem with that was that his hand was still burned. Not nearly as badly as the day before due to his magic working furiously to heal him at an accelerated rate, but still bad enough to keep him mostly limited to indoor activities. He also wasn't eager to make his way into Angel Grove again. Partially because of how poorly his first outing had turned out and partially because he would rather have one of the Rangers along with him to show him around. The other teens were all busy though, having all made plans for that day with their respective families. And so it was that Harry spent most of his Sunday that he hadn't already slept through in deep meditation, shoring up his occlumency shields, sorting through new memories, and trying not to think about how bored he really was. The next morning Harry woke up at a more appropriate waking time only to find that there was still nothing to do. This time the reason was that it was Monday and the Rangers were all in school. High school at that. As in not even legally adults yet. And they were fighting in a war to save the planet. The level of random parallels between what the Rangers were doing now and the things Harry had had to live with back in his own world sometimes scared him. But that did bring him to another thought. If the Rangers were still in school, all in their junior year of high school according to Zordon, clarifying that they only had one more year after their current before they graduated when Harry had asked, then that meant that they were most likely younger than he was. Not that Harry's lofty 19 years, or was it 13 with the time travel, gave him any sense of superiority over the younger Rangers. Upon asking again, Zordon revealed that Jason and Zach were 18 and the rest were 17. Zach had also had a birthday recently, which had been crashed by one of Rita's monsters. This story about the nasty night had developed into Zordon telling the board wizard about the various battles that the current team of Power Rangers had engaged in since the formation of their team a few months previously. From there, Zordon went back through the ages, filling Harry's head with tales of past deeds of greatness and goodness. From a previous team of Rangers battling an ancient evil, a morphological being known as Ivan Ooze, to Zordon himself battling against Rita's forces in the time before his imprisonment. As it turned out, the ancient being rather enjoyed telling these stories, and the both of them lost track of time until Harry nearly fell asleep where he was sitting against one of the consoles, having to be roused by Alpha to head to his room to sleep more comfortably. On Tuesday morning, Harry woke slowly, feeling the lethargy that slips over everyone when they wake late and know it, but can't quite work up the longing to get up just yet. He shifted around slightly, knowing he lacked the room on his cot-like bed to really roll around much, and attempted to get back to sleep. Then he sat up when the noise that had finally roused him registered. There was shouting in the main room of the command center. Without a further thought and now fully awake, Harry jumped off his bed and out his door. To those standing in the command center that were not privy to the secret door and associated room Harry had created, it appeared as though Harry had shown up out of thin air standing shirtless, his lightly muscled torso on full display, and in a pair of black and green pajama pants with tiny golden snitches on them. It took several moments of everyone staring before Harry noticed his state of undress. With a thought and a wave of his hand, Harry's pajama pants flowed around him, forming into a pair of blue jeans and a white t-shirt with white tennis shoes. Now dressed properly, Harry once more focused on the people standing in the command center. Morning, why are Billy and Kimberly in a glowing cage? And why are they dressed like whatever it is they're dressed like? Billy, far from his blue coveralls and large glasses, was now wearing dark-colored jeans and a tight black shirt with a blue jean vest with torn sleeves over it. He was wearing a pair of blue-tinted sunglasses and a black bandana over his hair along with various chains and some kind of collar. Kimberly was wearing very short pink shorts and a pink and white top with a pair of high boots. She also wore a blue jean jacket and a spiked collar around her neck. Her hair looked rather frazzled compared to the last time Harry had seen her, and she seemed to be wearing an overabundance of makeup as she stood there obnoxiously chewing a piece of gum as loudly as she possibly could. The two of them were standing within a set of vertical bars that were glowing with a white light around 10 feet from where Harry had set up the door to his room. They seemed to be rather cautious about staying away from the bars, so Harry figured they were probably energized somehow to keep the two inside. "Good morning, Harry," Zordon began. "It is good that you have joined us, as I feel your magical abilities may be of some use in our present situation." Nodding to Jason, Trini, and Zach, and selectively ignoring the slight blush on Trini's face, Harry made his way to stand before Zordon in the middle of the command center. "Sure, Zordon. I'll be glad to do what I can." "Hey!" Kimberly suddenly shouted in a rather loud and obnoxious voice that easily drew everyone's attention. "Quit talking about us like we're not here." As her face twisted into an ugly sneer, Billy's face mimicked hers. "Yeah," he shouted, using an equally obnoxious tone. "Quit it or we'll kick your freaking butts." Then they both started cackling to each other like they had said something funny. Harry raised an eyebrow and looked back toward Zordon. "So, huh? Please, observe the viewing globe and all will be made clear." Harry immediately turned with the other Rangers, at least those not currently in a cage, to watch the images forming within the large orb. The first thing that Harry saw was the blue-winged monkey-looking guy that had shown up with Golder and one other when the Rangers were battling the pin octopus. The being was riding some kind of flying bicycle and carrying a red liquid in a beaker. "This is Babu," Zordon started. "He is one of Rita's most loyal servants. Despite his usual dim-wittedness, he is actually a gifted chemist and has created a formula that, when ingested, turned Billy and Kimberly into what they are now." Harry nodded in thought. "So it's some kind of personality-altering potion? It changed them into that?" "Indeed," Zordon continued. "I have seen this used before in my past dealings with Rita. Babu calls it his punk potion, and it alters the personality of whomever imbibes it and makes them rude and obnoxious to everyone around them. Why don't you let us out of here and then I'll show you rude and obnoxious, you green-headed freak." Billy taunted, sparking off another grating round of laughter from the two punked Power Rangers. With a negligent wave of his hand, Harry cast a silencing charm around the cage, instantly cutting off the harsh noise from the two afflicted teens. "Well, I can certainly try and check them out. I've gotta warn you though, medical spells aren't really my strongest area. I mean, I know a bit of first aid healing and such, I kinda had to since I was fighting all the time, but it's certainly not my specialty." "Any help you can provide will be appreciated, Harry," Zordon responded. "When last I encountered this formula, the only cure we could find involved a key ingredient, the singing squash. This rare plant only grows in certain dimensional gaps. Alpha and I are currently searching for such a gap, but it will take some time to locate one, much less retrieve the squash from it. I fear that Rita will take advantage of our situation before we are able to do so successfully." Harry, silently agreeing with Zordon, made his way back over to the cage, passing through the outer limits of his silencing charm as he did. "Hey! Kimberly was shouting, and probably had been since shortly after Harry first cast the spell if the redness in her face was anything to go by. Stop ignoring us and let us out. Yeah, Billy parroted. Let us out, you wimp. Ignoring them as best he could, Harry cast a basic medical diagnostic charm. It was one of the first charms that he had been taught by MDM Pomfrey during the war. The kindly hospital wing matron had been the only fully medically trained individual in the order at the time and was more than eager to teach her skills to anyone else who was interested, even if it was only enough to take a tiny bit of the workload off her hands. Every bit helped in those days. After receiving the results, Harry casually stepped back out of the magical bubble of silence, wiggling a finger in one ear in an attempt to dull the ringing in it caused by the shouting from the two teens. "BLDY hell," he mumbled. "I'm sure glad they aren't normally like that. I don't think I'd be able to keep myself from cursing them every time I see them." Zack quickly stepped up to Harry, staring him in the eyes with a serious look and his hands placed on the wizard's shoulders. "Harry," Zack started calmly. "We really need to introduce you to Bulk and Skull." Almost immediately Trini and Zack burst out laughing, though Jason limited himself to a smirk, his face otherwise retaining a very tense sort of wariness coupled with occasional concerned glances at his two friends in the cage. Not getting the joke, though if the calculating look still in Zack's eyes was anything to go by he would be able to understand before too long, Harry turned back to Zordon to give his report. "Well," he started. "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that your diagnosis is correct based on what I can tell. Billy and Kimberly are in fact under the influence of some kind of mind-altering potion. The bad news is that that's about all I can tell. These types of charms are rather detail-oriented and I can't get as good of a read without a focus. Do you have any other ideas as to how we can cure them?" Trini was quick to ask, the worry clearly evident in her features and voice now that her laughing fit had calmed. Harry only shook his head sadly. "Not as such, no. If I had my kit from back during the war I could WHP up a potion or two that may do the trick, maybe a dose of Mandrake restorative draft from the supply." He trailed off for a moment before violently shaking his head again, casting the thoughts of what could have been done, if only, aside. "Other than what I was able to tell you already, little as it was, there really isn't anything I can add. Sorry." Trini and the others seemed to slump slightly before she spoke again. "It's all right, Harry. We were just hoping that you'd have an idea." Before Harry could respond, Zordon cut in, "Our only recourse at this point is to remain in readiness as we continue the search for the singing squash. Do not worry yourselves over what might have been. The only outcome on that path is painful for all involved." As the only teen present with any kind of experience with more traditional war, Harry fully understood Zordon's point. It was something that had been drilled into his head by Moody and Dumbledore almost endlessly. If you spent all your time looking back, you missed what was coming up ahead, and that could cost you dearly. Especially when one wrong step could mean the end of it all. With a firm nod, Harry turned back to the undrugged rangers with a playful smile on his face. "So, aren't you guys supposed to be in school?" Zack's face lit up in a smile while Jason's remained neutral and Trini actually looked a bit down. It was Zack, however, who answered his question. "That's one perk of this Power Ranger thing that I've certainly enjoyed. If there's an emergency during school hours, Zordon can usually use his magic to help cover for us so we won't get in trouble." The happy teen started lightly hopping and dancing in place, lightly punching Jason in the shoulder and causing the more muscled teen to smile. "Yes," Trini interjected as she rolled her eyes. "But then we have to study twice as hard to make up for what we missed without making it seem like we really missed it in the first place. And there's no real substitute for a professional teacher showing us these things." So it seemed like Zack was, much as Harry had first surmised, rather laid back. He enjoyed getting time away from school like most teens, but was still capable of taking things seriously when necessary, as illustrated by his double life as a ranger. He just joked around as much as he could, kind of a comic relief thing. Keep the spirits of the others up as much as he can. Trini by contrast was clearly much more academically minded. Perhaps not to the same level as Billy, but then again, with a brain like his he may not have to take it as seriously to do as well as he does. Before Harry's mind could continue on his evaluations of his new almost friends, Jason spoke up. "So, why can't we hear them anymore?" He nodded toward Billy and Kimberly, who were both now completely red in the face, their mouths moving as they shouted what were inevitably obscenities and insults at all and sundry. "Silencing charm," Harry said with a smile. "It's a variant of the basic charm in this case in that instead of silencing an object, it silences an area. It's a rather simple and incredibly handy spell. It can be used for anything from quieting an annoyance, as in this case, to silencing shoes so you can sneak up on someone, to getting rid of the annoying squeak on the fourth stair down in your house." Zack blinked. That was an oddly specific example. Harry chuckled for a moment. Back in my old world, that kind of thing happened more often than you'd think. Magic has its own rules and a sort of sentience. Houses or structures that were exposed to extreme levels of magic over long periods of time developed certain quirks. It was almost like the ambient magic brought them to life. So one could find themselves in an ancestral home and having to renew a silencing charm on a particular step each morning because the house seemed to like the squeak it made and so fought to keep making the noise, resisting any magic you applied. Jason's eyes had gotten rather wide. That sounds crazy, houses coming to life? I don't think I could live like that. Harry just shrugged. You get used to that kind of thing after a while. Back at my old school, the staircases would randomly switch where they went to. It was rather inconvenient to be trying to get to a class only to have the stairs move while you were on them and drop you off on the other side of the school. You just have to learn to adapt. Or make friends with the stairs. That works too. Silence fell again as none of the Rangers quite knew how to respond to Harry's matter-of-fact statement. Finally, Trini stepped over toward Harry, reaching out toward his injured hand. Here, Harry, she said as she took hold of his arm and lifted his hand up. Let me check your bandages. It's probably past time they got changed anyway. Oh. Harry gave a slight start at the unexpected contact. Are you the one who wrapped my hand then? Thanks for that, by the way. Trini smiled as she unwound the bandages carefully. It's no problem. After all, you got hurt defending my friends, so it's the least I could do. Besides, I took a first aid class at the youth center a while ago, but the suits protect us from most of the injuries we would otherwise be receiving, so I hardly ever get to use what I learned. By this point, Trini had the bandages most of the way off and was carefully running her fingertips along the nearly perfectly healed, if still slightly pink, flesh that had been exposed. I don't understand, she said, attracting the attention of Zordon, Jason, and Zach. When I wrapped this, the skin was really badly burnt, but now it looks almost as good as new. Perplexed, she looked up at Harry, curiosity in her eyes. Did you use some of your healing magic or something? You said you had been taught some, right? Harry gave a non-committal shrug. Funny thing about that. It's a strange quirk of healing magic that it cannot be administered wandlessly to oneself. It's been studied for generations and nobody has ever been able to explain it. But the point is, no, I didn't heal myself actively. On top of it being an unexplainable magical impossibility, those were magical burns, so adding more magic to them would actually be like rubbing sandpaper across a bad sunburn. Generally not a good idea. The other humans in the room winced at the comparison. No, the burns healed so fast simply because I'm a wizard. Our magic helps accelerate our healing most of the time. If it weren't for the fact that the excess magic had to be leached out before the damage could be fixed, these burns probably wouldn't even be tender by now. Harry smiled at the dumbfounded looks on their faces. I love magic. It may be random sometimes and generally unpredictable, but you can't argue with the perks. After Trini had rewrapped his hand, just in case, the 3 Rangers and 1 wizard spent the next few hours waiting. As it was, Harry was rather accustomed to the practice after the last 2 days and was glad for the slight change brought about by the presence of the other 3, but that didn't change the simple fact of their overwhelming boredom. Since they were supposed to be in school, they couldn't exactly go wandering around town for fear of being discovered. There really wasn't enough room in the command center for any sparring practice, and Harry didn't know any form of martial arts anyway, something the Rangers almost unanimously decided to try and rectify as soon as they could. The boredom got so bad that Jason had started pacing in his frustration while Zach seemed to almost be vibrating where he sat due to prolonged inaction. Trini seemed mostly alright, but she had apparently studied a few styles of kung fu and was used to long periods of meditation and stillness as a result. Harry had spent copious amounts of time in meditation for his occlumency over the years, but that didn't mean he was comfortable with the weight, so her explanation befuddled him. So it was with an almost palpable sense of relief that the alarm klaxons in the command center began sounding off about 2 hours after their conversation had ended. Alpha immediately started to panic as he ran over to the viewing globe, now showing a large, bipedal toad-like creature with a horn on its forehead and a large, distended stomach. Ay. Oh no. Zordon, Rita has sent a monster to attack Angel Grove. It is her most evil creation yet, the Terror Toad, Zordon stated, his calm seemingly unshakable. This creature has an insatiable appetite and will eat nearly anything. Worse still, its power grows the more it ingests. You must take immediate action, Rangers. Jason stepped forward immediately, Trini and Zach flanking him while Harry stood off to one side with a slightly bemused look on his face at their actions. But Zordon, what about Billy and Kimberly? We shall continue the search for the singing squash. I feel we are very close now. As soon as it is located, I shall send Alpha to retrieve it and prepare the antidote for Babu's punk potion. In the meantime, the three of you will need to do whatever you can to hold off the terror toad. Harry, I would ask that you accompany the Rangers. They may need your help against this monster. Harry gave the giant head a short nod. I'll do whatever I can to help, Zordon. Very well then. I thank you, Harry. Go now, Rangers, and may the power protect you. Alright, guys. It's morphin' time. Once the three Rangers were in costume again, the four were teleported by Alpha to the area of the park that the monster was in, Harry in a white beam and the others in their respective colors. Once he gathered himself again, Harry turned to the costumed heroes. Well, Jason, you're the leader, how do you want to do this? Jason paused for a moment in thought before responding. Do you have that cloak on you? The one that turns you invisible, I mean. At Harry's nod he continued. Then put it on. Stay nearby and provide support as you can. You don't have the same level of protection that our suits provide us and you don't have any martial arts training, so you won't be able to mesh with our attacks very well, but if you stay out of sight it should give us an advantage. Harry saw this for what it really was. Jason was trying to keep him out of the way. He fully expected for the three Rangers to take care of the toad monster easily and didn't want Harry to do anything to interfere with that. That level of cockiness could end up getting someone hurt, especially in the face of Rita's current CRP of monsters that they already knew were stronger than any before. Nonetheless, Harry nodded before pulling out the cloak of invisibility and wrapping it around himself. Good luck everyone, he said before pulling the hood over his head. Jason nodded himself after Harry vanished. Alright Rangers, let's take care of this toad. As he spoke he swiped his hand through the air and then formed a tight fist and held it in front of his face. Right. Zack and Trini spoke simultaneously, mimicking Jason's clenched fist before they ran off. Harry had noticed the Rangers did this random hand-waving and fist-clenching thing a lot. Whether it was part of them acting the part of being superheroes as they saw it or something else he hadn't quite decided yet. By the time Harry had broken out of his musings the Rangers already had a decent head start on him. When he finally caught up to them, they were already engaging the toad-like monster with their blade blasters. Harry stood back for a moment and observed the creature more closely, taking in detail he had missed in the viewing globe. The creature's arms looked far too short to fight effectively over its enormous stomach, though it appeared to manage well enough if its apparently effortless blocks of the Rangers' attacks and follow-up counterstrikes were anything to go by. It seemed to move far too quickly for something with its outrageous proportions, though its bulk clearly worked in its favor from a defensive standpoint as Harry watched it simply absorb a powerful kick from Jason without even flinching before knocking the Ranger away again. Shaking himself slightly, Harry resolved to think more on this later. It was entirely possible that very little of his previous battle knowledge and tactics from the war against Voldemort would stand in this new world. The rules of magic as he knew them didn't exclusively apply around here, so who's to say that anything else would be the same? Pure-blooded Death Eaters probably didn't fight anything like Rita's monsters would. He was once more drawn from his thoughts as the terror toad knocked Jason and Zack away in a shower of sparks, grabbed Trini by one arm and flung her through the air away from the other two Rangers and toward where Harry stood, invisible. As the Yellow Ranger struggled to regain her feet, the monster opened its mouth wide and its long tongue flew out, wrapping around her securely. Mere moments later, the toad gave a heave of its head and Trini began flying toward its gaping maw. SHT. Harry cursed, thinking quickly. Accio. The toad seemed confused for a moment as its strength was countered by a still invisible Harry's summoning charm. Trini was left suspended in the air between the two, held there by the tension of the toad's retracting tongue and the pull of Harry's spell and willpower. The stalemate was ended when Jason leapt between the monster and his teammate, his longsword once more in hand and flashing in the sunlight as he struck out at the fleshy muscle holding the Yellow Ranger. Almost immediately the terror toad's tongue released Trini as he stumbled back, allowing Harry's charm to finally begin pulling her through the air towards him. "Oh bugger," Harry murmured just before she crashed into him, sending both of them sprawling to the ground and causing Harry's cloak to flip up, revealing him to Rita's monster. "Oh it shouted. It's that little mage BRT that MSTRS Rita warned me about. So that's how you stopped me from eating that Ranger. I'm gonna make you guys pay for getting in the way of my snack." Jason and Zack, now wielding a large black axe, both moved to hold the reptile back while Trini and Harry recovered. Well, Harry started once the two had regained their feet. That went well. "I guess there's not much point in me staying invisible now that he knows I'm here. And Rita told him about me, that's something as well, I suppose. We'll just have to think on it later." Trini cut him off. "For now I've gotta get back in there and help the others." Without another word, Trini somehow manifested a pair of foot-long daggers with yellow handles and silver pommels and leapt back into the fight. Quite literally in this case, as she flew through the air an impossible distance to deal a quick double slash with her weapons, sending sparks flying off of the toad monster on impact. "Oh, you're back to play some more?" The terror toad mocked as he took a half step back, the only reaction given after Trini's attack. "Why don't you try flying again?" The monster swung one of its stunted arms and smashed into Trini, sending her once more through the air only to crash into a tree. "And now you're mine." The toad once more fired its tongue toward Trini, hoping to make a meal of the Yellow Ranger. Once more acting quickly, Harry apparat over to Trini, grabbed her, and vanished again with a soft pop, reappearing on the other side of the toad with the other two rangers. "Was that teleportation?" Zack asked, his voice awash in awe. "Sure didn't feel like it," Trini groaned, collapsing to her knees as Harry knelt next to her in concern. "I feel like Power Ranger Taffy." "Sorry about that," Harry said shyly. Apparition is hardly the most fun way to travel, but if it's any consolation, you do get used to the stretching sensation. Eventually anyway. Slowly, Trini's helmeted head turned to face Harry. "It's not. It's really not." Her voice was practically dripping sarcasm. "We don't have time for this now." Jason interrupted with a fierce shout before charging back at the now recovered toad only to be once more easily smacked out of the way. "You're getting on my nerves, little human." The toad shouted as he knocked Zack to one side as well and began waddling at his full, and honestly impressive for his size, speed toward Harry and the still incapacitated Trini. "All this fighting is making me hungry and I see my main course." Standing smoothly, Harry took a quick glance over the battlefield. Jason and Zack had not yet regained their feet after their most recent failed exchanges with the monster, and Trini was still recovering. The toad was around 20 feet away now, but seemed unwilling to just use his tongue again after Harry had ruined his last two attempts. It looked like it was time for the man who won to step up. Moving to stand in front of Trini, Harry waved his right hand before him and began focusing his will and magic. The ground started to rumble and the toad stumbled slightly before tripping and rolling to a stop around a dozen feet away from Harry. Before anyone could react, the earth erupted around the fallen monster only for the loose dirt in the air to then coalesce into four large stone arms that quickly latched onto the flailing limbs of the terror toad, holding it to the ground. With a deep breath, Harry took a step closer and began calling up his magic again, releasing it into the air around him and pushing the entire mass of air and magic forward so that it engulfed the now panicking monster. It wasn't until the three rangers gathered together behind Harry that they truly began to notice the cold. Ice started forming on the tips of the grass around the trapped reptile and the monster began to shriek as the chilling fingers of frost began to spread onto it. "No!" it screamed, now in a full panic. "Not the cold. I hate the CCC cold." Its cries for mercy, whether genuine or not, were in vain however, as mere moments later, and with a soft exhalation from Harry, the terror toad, the stone arms restraining it, and everything within 2 feet in every direction froze into a solid block of ice. The rangers just stood dumbfounded as they stared at the monster that they had been unable to deal any real damage to for the entirety of their fight. Finally, Zack spoke in a breathless whisper that nonetheless carried easily in the complete silence that had engulfed the area. "Whoa." "Yeah," Harry panted. "Whoa. That guy put up more of a fight than I thought he would. I guess these monsters are resistant to most normal magics. I don't know if that is because of the Elder Wand or some innate resistance, but it took way more magic than it should have to freeze him like that." "You never mentioned you could do something like that." Jason almost sounded upset with Harry, although the heavy tone of shock masked most of it. Harry gave a smile, mischief dancing in his eyes. "Well, you never asked, did you?" Any response Jason may have made was interrupted by the high-pitched mumbling of a horde of putties and the dark cackling of Golder. "So Rangers, you think that your pet Magling has defeated the terror toad, do you?" Golder spoke as he appeared alongside the putties around the toad cycle. "Well, guess again." With an almost negligent swing of his sword, Golder shattered the ice around the toad and the stone arms restraining it. Now released from his icy prison, the toad leapt to its feet once more. "Now you've made me hopping mad. I'm gonna make you pay for that, and I'm gonna start with the little mage." Without another word, the monster once more let his tongue fly, traversing the dozen feet between it and Harry in mere moments. Yet Harry, his reflexes honed through his years fighting against dark wizards and his training at the hands of the best the Order of the Phoenix could offer, was faster still. With a mere thought, Harry conjured a metal pole directly in front of him and watched with detached humor as the terror toad's tongue wrapped around it instead of him. Then he quickly cast a cooling charm on his left hand, followed by an overpowered heating charm on the pole using his charmed hand. The end result, the cooling charm was cancelled, the pole got red hot in an instant, and the toad began screaming in agony. "W-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A- argh, it screamed, quickly retracting its tongue and leaving a few scraps of burnt flesh behind on the pole that Harry quickly vanished. Bwa bibu boo boo me? Ma pong. Bad ma pong. Aorarg. Golder growled as the toad monster and held his burned tongue in his stubby arms. Curse you Magling. Putty patrollers, attack. As the gray-colored horde of evil soldiers moved to encircle the Rangers and Harry, Jason finally snapped out of his shock. Alright guys, let's do this. Right. Zack and Trini responded before the three costumed teens charged to meet the putties head-on. Their battle quickly took them off to one side, leaving Harry standing on his own, idly staring down Golder and the still writhing Toad. You won't be so lucky this time, Magling, Golder taunted as he began to stalk forward, brandishing his sword. There won't be any Power Rangers to save you from your early demise. You know Golder, Harry mused, backing up as he spoke. I've fought against and been threatened by individuals much scarier and uglier than you. I'm still around to talk about it. What do you think happened to them? With a quick lunge, Harry dashed to the opposite side from where the Rangers were battling the putties, simultaneously casting a reductor curse out of his left hand and forcing down the twinge of pain as he did so. Golder swung his sword before him, deflecting the curse down into the ground and causing an explosion that sent a shower of dirt into the air. This provided cover enough for Harry to draw his cloak closed around him and flip up the hood once more, vanishing from sight before the air cleared. Golder was rather quick to notice this. Hiding Magling, he drawled. I'll just have to flush you out. With a dramatic wave of his free arm that Harry was almost coming to expect before any non-physical attack, Golder's eyes lit up and beams of energy lanced out, raking across the earth and forcing Harry to dive for the ground to avoid being bisected. One benefit of battle transfiguration magic was that it left no light trail for an opponent to follow to a hidden attacker. Harry had used this tactic somewhat often in the war against Voldemort and fell back on his old standby as his magic caused the ground to surge up around Golder in the form of 4 writing tentacles that quickly moved to restrain Rita's general. Golder had not earned his position through laziness, however. With a few quick swings of his blade, each of the earthen tentacles were severed from their bases, disrupting the magic holding them together and causing them to fall back to the ground in a shower of loose soil. Harry had barely managed to regain his feet before Golder once more let loose a blast of energy from his eyes, forcing him to shield himself and give away his position. Your magic is formidable, Magling, Golder spoke as he stalked toward the Protego bubble, his eye lasers pounding on Harry's defenses. And it is certainly interesting that you can use it without a focus, as my MSTRS assumed. Yeah, Harry interrupted, letting out another pulse of magic with his left hand, his right busy holding up his Protego. You'll find I'm just full of surprises. Golder quickly lost his footing as the solid earth beneath him turned to a glue-like quicksand, and the laser attack quickly breaking down Harry's shield was cut off when he began to sink, his instinctive struggling only causing him to sink more rapidly. Acting quickly, Harry operated to stand a short distance behind Golder, who was now submerged to just above his waist with his left arm stuck from just below his elbow where he had tried to free himself. He moved just in time as another lance of energy shot out from Golder's furious eyes and caused an explosion where Harry had been standing mere moments before. With a grimace at how close he had been to being blasted, Harry transfigured the quicksand that now held Golder most of the way up his torso into concrete. The monster was left trapped with his head and shoulders exposed and his sword arm and weapon awkwardly held in the air to keep it free. Then things really went downhill. Zack! Harry spun around at Jason's shout in time to see that the Terror Toad had recovered and gone after the Rangers. His last sight of Zack was a pair of black and white legs kicking frantically as they disappeared into the giant reptilian monster's mouth. Laughing the entire time, the Toad pounded one hand on his stomach until an image of Zack's Black Ranger helmet appeared on it. Tasty, the Toad gloated. He was good. Every time I swallow one of you my power grows. The Toad then descended into cackles as Jason and Trini stood helplessly, most likely shocked into inaction at their friend's apparent fate. They didn't get to remain stunned for long though, as the putties quickly moved to engage them again, most likely having backed off when the Toad struck. Harry himself was distracted by an explosion from behind him and spun back around to find Golder had freed himself and was climbing out of the newly created hole in the ground. You and the Rangers are finished, the simian mocked as he once more advanced on Harry, forcing him to back up to stay out of range of the monster's sword. Once the Terror Toad devours the yellow and red Rangers, he will be more than powerful enough to take care of the remaining 2. And that's only if you pathetic do-gooders manage to cure them of the effects of Babu's punk potion. Harry scrambled to think of something, anything at this point, to get the Rangers and himself out of this mess. The near-constant metallic clanging sound of the putties being hit by the other rangers reassured him that they hadn't been eaten just yet, but that wasn't much comfort in the grand scheme of things. Moments later, Trini's scream accompanied by more of the toad's guttural laughter and Jason's own cry of denial let him know that he hadn't been thinking fast enough and another ranger just got eaten. Golder let out a laugh of his own as he lunged toward Harry faster than before, making the wizard stumble and fall to his back. Just give in, Magling. You've lost. The monster brought his sword around and rested the point just below Harry's chin. Harry's eyes narrowed and he took a deep breath, forcibly calming himself and ignoring the cold steel on his neck. If there's one thing I've learned in my life, Golder, it's to never give up. There's always a chance. Golder's glare seemed to intensify as he brought his sword back up over his head in preparation to end Harry's life. So be it. With the blade away from him, Harry took his chance and sent a full-body bind at Golder. At such a close range, the monster had no time at all to react to the flash of light before his arms snapped to his sides and his legs locked together. The wizard quickly climbed back to his feet and stood before the trapped simian who appeared to be straining for all he was worth to escape the spell's magical hold. Sorry about that, mate, Harry spoke casually. I've got a few things to take care of, so I can't play with you anymore. Without another word he gave the monster a slight shove which caused the armor-plated monkey to fall stiffly to his back and bounce a few times before settling down. His current opponent taken care of for the moment, Harry spun around and began running toward Jason. His hands started giving off flashes of light as he cast a barrage of magic at the putties surrounding the Red Ranger to try and give him some breathing room. The clay constructs were pummeled with tripping jinxes, leg locker curses, full body binds, knockback jinxes, and any other minor offensive spells Harry could think of as he approached. His spellwork, while mostly intended to distract while causing minimal damage to himself, did its job as Jason was able to capitalize on it and get away from the horde of putties that had been surrounding him. Thanks, Harry, Jason said, sounding out of breath as he stood next to the wizard and faced down the putties. I thought they had me there for a minute. Hey, not a problem, Harry responded, equally out of breath from his rapid casting. Just figured I'd do what I could to pull my own weight, you know? So, where'd the toad go? Jason shook his head. I don't know. It just vanished somehow. Like it has camouflage or something. That's right. The sudden shout was accompanied by the reappearance of the terror toad as it faded into view right behind the two. The monster then wasted no time in knocking Harry and Jason away, sending them flying off in either direction with a powerful strike from its stubby arms. Harry landed roughly, bouncing and then rolling to a stop while cradling his right shoulder where he had been hit by the powerful reptile. He was sure that if it hadn't been for his magic making him harder to injure than an average human he would have probably broken something. As it was, he knew he had a huge bruise at the least. Hearing a series of small explosions, Harry glanced up from his prone position in time to see the terror toad pummeling Jason with rapid-fire blows, sending sparks flying in every direction. He saw the toad open its mouth and launch its tongue at the Red Ranger. He saw it eat him. Harry then felt a slight tug on his magical senses that he recognized as a spell he had recently cast being broken. Then he heard the yell. My Gilia. Golder was free and out for his BLD. As Harry lay there, only one thought came to mind. BLDY hell. Alright, Potter, think. Harry's thoughts raced as he climbed to his feet. It's just me against a bunch of bad guys, just like the Death Eaters back home. So treat this just like back then. I don't have a wand, so I'll need to use battle rhythm. It also wouldn't hurt to even the numbers a bit, so transfiguration and animation. And I need to do something about that toad's disappearing act. Tracking charm then. Right. Get to it. With a deep breath, Harry settled into a wide stance and started reaching for his magic again. If he had had a wand, or any focus really, it would have made the entire thing easier. A focus acted as a direct link to a wizard's magic and allowed almost instantaneous casting with the proper incantations and wand movements. Wandless magic on the other hand lacked that handy bridge, forcing the magic user to actively pull their magic up to the surface before it could be manifested in the spells. Naturally, this was a problem if one was in a fast-paced fight for one's life. Moody and Dumbledore had, of course, taught Harry to use magic without a wand, but they also knew that he would most often use the skill after being disarmed during a battle. Without the speed granted by a wand, even the most powerful of wizards could lose to a comparatively weaker one of similar skill simply because they can cast more spells than the wandless one can respond to. The answer to this problem, created by a war wizard centuries before, was a technique of magical combat known as battle rhythm and had been the next logical step for Harry's education in magical combat. The technique called for the user to have a deep connection to their magic that would allow them to manipulate it on a far greater level than most could ever imagine. The magic would then be caused to bounce, as it were, rising and falling on its own and allowing the caster to use wandless magic with impunity, though the strength of the spells were determined by the height of the surge at the time of the casting. The more one trained in the technique and the better one got at it, the faster the surges came and went, thus increasing the tempo of the rhythm. It was an exhausting technique though, leaving the user physically drained after the surges were allowed to stop, and was best used only when in dire situations or vastly outnumbered. Kind of like Harry was right now. Another side effect of battle rhythm was that it brought a glowing aura into existence around the user that grew and shrank in time with the surges of magic. If the opponent knew about the technique, it made it somewhat easier for them to predict when you would cast. If the opponent didn't know about it, it made for a somewhat intimidating light show. So it was that as Harry reached down to his magic and gave it a thrum as if springing a giant RBB band, Rita's forces opposite him recoiled slightly when he was immediately surrounded by a bright light that pulsed and receded every second or so. The terror toad in particular had trouble as it managed to stumble and fall to its back in a reflexive attempt to get away. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Harry sent a silent and colorless tracking charm to tag the downed monster so he would know where it was if it used its cloaking ability. "You think a fancy light show will save you, Magling?" Golder taunted mere moments later, his bravado causing the putties to regroup as well. "The battle is all but over. 3 of the rangers have been devoured and you cannot possibly hope to stand against all of us alone." Doing a quick head count, Harry counted an even dozen putties twitching and stomping around Golder and the once again standing terror toad. With a nod to himself, Harry began siphoning off a portion of magical energy from each upsurge, allowing it to refill from his core before taking still more and working it into the spell. "This battle is far from over, Golder," Harry shouted a few seconds later, spreading his arms to each side. "And I'm far from alone." In a visible wave of power, his collected magic spread from him and settled into the earth. Mere moments later, the earth began rumbling before multiple sections of dirt started rolling and contracting around a central point for several seconds, forming into vaguely humanoid shapes. After a few seconds, the figures started moving, climbing out of the craters they had been created from to stand in 2 ranks of 7 between Harry and his foes. The stone golems Harry had transfigured and animated from the earth around him stood around 6 feet tall. Their brown, stone skin gave the appearance of dense muscle, but the occasional grain line or rough, craggy patch easily pointed to their earthen origin. Each of the humanoid faces stared straight ahead, reflecting no emotion in their glowing, molten red eyes as they stood nearly at attention before their creator. "You think a few stone soldiers can stand up to the power of Empress Rita?" Golder continued to taunt Harry, his simian face not showing anything clearly recognizable as fear or hesitation. "Putty patrollers, attack." With mindless obedience, the gray figures of Rita's frontline troops began charging, hopping, and tumbling forward at a respectable speed toward Harry and his golems. With a thought, Harry sent his soldiers forward as well. The 2 forces met much closer to Harry than they were to Golder and the Terror Toad, but that had more to do with the comparative slowness in his golems than anything else. All the same, what they lacked in speed, the golems made up for in strength and numbers over the putties. Nothing the putties did was able to do more than scratch their magically reinforced stone skin. No blow strong enough to even make them stagger back a single step. And then they struck back. Their attacks had none of the form and precision that existed in the putties' own strikes. Since Harry didn't have any ability in hand-to-hand combat, his creations were the same. But their strength meant that all it took was one hit to stagger the gray creatures and it was all but done. The first putty that failed to avoid a solid hit and went down was quickly set upon by the golem that had knocked it off its feet. The magical construct pinned it to the ground before it began melting into the earth it was made from, turning back into regular stone and effectively trapping Rita's creation in place. When roughly half the putties had been restrained, Harry took his chance and disapparated, appearing a short distance behind Golder with a near-silent pop. His disappearance was immediately noticed. "Stay alert!" Golder roared to the toad. "The Magaling has the ability to become invisible." The toad bobbed his entire body forward in what must have been a nod. "He can't hide from me. But I can hide from him." With another obnoxious laugh, the monster's horn gave off a soft glow as it faded from view again. Hoping to act before he was noticed, and before the toad moved too much, Harry got as close as he could to Golder before casting on an upsurge. Expelliarmus. The spell splashed over the unsuspecting Golder and sent him to the ground near the minion melee that was quickly coming to an end as his sword spun through the air. With his next surge, Harry used a summoning charm to pull the sword to his right hand and, using its momentum, spun around with it before releasing it right at the where his tracking spell said the terror toad was. The toad screamed out its pain as the simian's sword crashed into it, unfortunately not point first, sending off a shower of sparks and making the reptile fall to the ground, luckily fading back into view at the same time. Panting lightly from his rapid magic use, Harry slumped for a moment, surveying the battlefield. He knew that, at best, he was only delaying them. His golems had nearly finished taking the putties out of the equation, but they wouldn't stand a chance against the more fearsome opponents. Golder was quickly climbing back to his feet, murder no doubt in his thoughts, and the toad was flopping about as it tried to do the same with its stubby arms. If he didn't get some help soon, then he wasn't going to have much option other than to resort to more damaging, combat-oriented spells, which would tear him up as well. He didn't want to have to do that again so soon. Harry didn't even want to think about what he'd do if even those spells failed. Golder's roar of rage broke him out of his thoughts as the monster charged directly at him, idly bashing Harry's two remaining golems to gravel with his bare fists on the way. "I'm tired of your games, Maggling. And I'm not especially fond of you either, Golder," Harry taunted before he started sending spells at the monster. Golder easily dodged the first few spells, swiftly stepping to one side or the other in mid-charge, but it wasn't long before he got caught by a tripping jinx and went sprawling once more to the ground. So focused on Golder, Harry didn't notice the terror toad's tongue until it had already wrapped around his right ankle. Harry was cut off as the monster jerked his body backward, its arms grabbing his tongue and pulling at the same time. Harry was yanked off his feet and through the air toward the toad's gaping maw. "Like hell!" Harry shouted, casting frantically toward the monster, Reducto. Impedimenta. Flipendo. It was his last spell that finally hit. The knockback jinx was cast on a downsurge, and so it was only enough to shift the toad back a short distance, but it still managed to be enough for Harry to miss its mouth. Instead, he slammed into the monster's oversized belly, which had the side effect of breaking his fall and knocking the toad once more to the ground, its tongue releasing him on the way. The landing was much rougher than Harry's already tired body was happy with, and it took him several seconds to regain his equilibrium. This was time that the once more recovered. Golder wasn't willing to give him. "It's over, Maggling." Golder growled as he grabbed him by his shirt collar with his left hand, easily lifting the wizard as he brandished his recovered sword in his right. "Now you die. Let him go, Golder." Harry's thoughts were only momentarily on the ranger's tendency to show up and save him at the last second before Golder spun him around and held him up against his chest plate in a one-armed choke hold. "Stay back, Rangers," the simian shouted, pointing his sword at the morphed Billy and Kimberly, clearly no longer affected by the punk potion. "Or your magic-using friend here pays the price." With Golder's attention diverted, Harry managed to twist his body just enough to apparate and pulled the monster along with him. The two vanished and reappeared 10 feet to the side with a loud crack, and Golder immediately let him go as his body reacted to the uncomfortable experience. Taking his chance, Harry pushed himself away from Golder, quickly apparating to a spot next to the newly arrived Rangers. "Are you all right?" Kimberly asked immediately as Harry rubbed at his neck. "And what's with the light show?" "Yeah," he responded, rolling his head around a bit to loosen up. "I'm all right, but you two definitely showed up at a good time. And this is a combat technique from my world. I'll explain later. Any ideas on freeing the others and beating these two?" "Affirmative," Billy nodded, clenching his fist in front of his face as he did so. "Zordon told us the terror toad's weak spot. All we have to do is remove his horn and then hit him just below his neck. The horn is the source of his power too, and it should weaken him enough to defeat him once everyone is free again." "Oh, is that all?" Harry rolled his eyes, but still taking note of what Billy said. "Do you have a plan for that by any chance?" "We've got it covered," Kimberly answered with her own nod. "Can you hold off Golder for a second?" Harry glanced over at the enraged simian, once more recovered and glaring. "Yeah, sure, if you guys can hold off the toad, I can probably take care of him for a minute or two." He cracked his knuckles and shook his hands out as he stepped up. "All right, one rainbow of BS coming right up." Harry didn't even wait for acknowledgement from the others before he started in. Since he had someone else to watch the other monster, he was able to give his full attention to Golder. This meant that his casting speed increased greatly, both by casting out of both hands and because of his increased mental focus. Not so say he wouldn't be faster with a wand, but he was still sending a semi-constant stream of spells at the golden-armored bane of his existence for the day. Tripping jinxes, knockback jinxes, impediment jinxes, light bludgeoners, even a few stunners that were spaced out enough to give him time to fight of the lethargy. Intermixed with these mostly offensive spells were a few more purely prank-oriented spells, the Jelly Legs Jinx, the Dancing Charm, overpowered Cheering Charms, even a few color change spells and minor transfigurations for good measure. Since he was too angry at this point to focus on dodging as well as he had earlier, Golder didn't manage to gain more than 5 feet of ground toward him between randomly falling on his face, getting pushed backward or feeling impact similar to a punch, and having his knees try to give out on him or start jerking uncontrollably. His increased anger and what had to have been some level of magical resistance kept most of the spells from affecting him for long, but everything at once was enough for a delay tactic. By the time the Terror Toad let out a scream of rage and anguish over losing his horn, the once fearsome general of Rita Repulsa's army was standing in pink and purple polka dot armor with neon green skin and brandishing an oversized daisy in the place of his sword. He had dirt all over his front from his multiple faceplants and his armor was riddled with dings and dents from spell impacts. "Now you've had it," Kimberly shouted, and Harry paused in his offensive and glanced over in time to see her fire an arrow from a pink and white bow that struck the Terror Toad just below its mouth. The monster let out another scream, this one of pain, as it fell to the ground. Its mouth opened wide to release 3 balls of energy that flew away from it and hit the ground with a flash that revealed the 3 formerly trapped Power Rangers. "What happened?" Trini shouted, confusion in her voice. "How'd we get out?" Jason spoke at the same time before spotting Billy and Kimberly and leading Zack and Trini over to them. Golder, seeing the tables turning once more, let out a growl. "I'll be back, Maggling, and next time you will not survive our encounter." Harry was cut off by Jason stepping in front of him while the others gathered around. "Not likely, Golder. You and Rita will never defeat the Power Rangers." Golder merely vanished in a flash of light, taking the trapped putties with him. The Toad then once more caught their attention while it climbed to its feet. "Now I'm really angry." Harry, no longer casting and seeing that the Rangers seemed to have things handled, doubled over with his hands on his knees and panting heavily. He felt a general ache and fatigue throughout his body as he let his battle rhythm slow to a stop, the magical aura around him fading as a result, and fought off a slight dizziness. Meanwhile, the Power Rangers were grandstanding. "You're going down, Wartface," Jason started, pointing his sword at the Toad before holding it horizontally in front of his chest. "And you're going down hard." Billy followed, spinning a double-ended blue lance before taking his own combat stance. "You've had it, Fly Breath." Zack continued as he brandished his axe similarly to the other two. "Give it up, Toad, you're gonna lose." Trini finished up, spinning one of her yellow daggers around one finger before posing as well. "Yeah, what they said," Harry panted, one hand still on his knees as he weakly pumped the other in the air while trying to catch his breath. "Woo go us." The Terror Toad gave a cry of rage as he began charging toward the group. Trini and Zack responded by doing another of the ridiculously long leaps that the Power Rangers seemed to favor, coming down on the monster with their weapons and delivering powerful blows that sent sparks everywhere. Billy followed them in and delivered his own hits, quickly followed by Jason, flipping through the air to make an overhead strike followed by a spin kick that knocked the Toad through the air to crash into a tree. Before the monster could recover, the Rangers regrouped. "Kimberly, power bow," Jason called out. "Right." Kimberly nodded before pulling her randomly vanishing bow out from behind her back somehow. At this point, Harry was just confused. It certainly looked like it had just been conjured, but none of the Rangers had that kind of magical ability from what he had noticed. The Pink Ranger then launched an arrow at the now standing Terror Toad. The arrow appeared to almost curve around intervening trees before landing solidly in the back of the monster's throat. The reptile's eyes widened as it gave a squeak of panic while random bolts of energy danced around it before it suddenly exploded. Harry blinked. Well, that was certainly abrupt and rather anticlimactic in all honesty. "Nobody messes with my friends," Kimberly taunted as the Rangers all struck a fighting pose around her. Harry blinked again. What in Merlin's name is going on here? "Harry." Trini jogged the short distance to his side and put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Oh sure," Harry said, slowly standing straight again as he caught his breath. "I'm just a tiny bit confused is all. What's with all the taunting and striking poses you guys were doing?" Trini seemed slightly startled. "You know, that's actually not a bad question." By now, the other Rangers had gathered around, their weapons once more vanished. Kimberly was the one who spoke first. "What's a good question? Why do we do all the poses and stuff when we're fighting?" The other Rangers seemed just as startled as Trini had been. I don't know," Jason said slowly, shaking his head. "I've never actually thought about it." Before anyone could say anything else on the subject, a quick 6-beep tone rang out from each of the Rangers. Jason responded first, lifting his left wrist up near his mouth. "We read you, Zordon." Apparently it was some kind of communication method between the Rangers and the command center. "Well done, Rangers, teleport to the command center. Harry, Alpha will bring you along with them if you are agreeable." Zordon's voice came from Jason's general direction. All right, Zordon. We're on our way. Jason lowered his hand from his face and looked at everyone else. Ready, guys? Just a moment actually, Harry spoke up before lifting his left hand. Accio horn. Mere moments later, the severed horn of the terror toad flew through the air and landed in his open palm with a soft smack. What's that, Harry? Zack asked. Is that the terror toad's horn? Billy fired off right afterward. Why would you want that? I'll explain back at the command center. It would be easier to only have to go over everything once, and Zordon and Alpha deserve to know too. Harry said with a soft smile. Now then, ready when you are. The Rangers seemed to look toward Jason, who was staring at Harry for a moment before nodding hesitantly. All right, we can wait a bit longer. I'm sure it's a hell of an explanation. The slight hostility in Jason's voice didn't give Harry any comfort. Let's go, guys. Teleporting now. The six figures were once more engulfed in pillars of light before they lifted into the air and streaked off into the distance. When they arrived at the command center, Harry was expecting an almost immediate interrogation. What he got was movie time. The Rangers first demorphed, their suits changing back into their regular clothes, including Billy and Kimberly into the punk clothes they had been wearing earlier. Almost immediately afterward, Kimberly nearly begged Harry to transfigure her clothing into something that didn't offend her normal sensibilities. Once he had managed to change her clothing into something similar to what he had seen her wearing at the amusement park, Billy asked for the same treatment. When everyone was comfortable, Zordon directed them to the viewing globe where they all watched the battle that they had just finished. It was a rather useful learning tool, all said and done. Zordon was able to point out a few points where the Rangers acted or hadn't acted that would have been more beneficial if they had done the opposite. It was the kind of thing that Moody had done for members of the Order of the Phoenix in the war against Voldemort. Zordon was just nicer about it and didn't shout about constant vigilance as much. Harry had given an explanation of his battle rhythm when prompted by Zordon and described his thought process when transfiguring his golems and in his spell choices. There wasn't much that Zordon could say to his actions since nobody else really knew what Harry could be capable of. Finally, they got to the end of the battle where Harry had been holding off Golder while Billy and Kimberly dealt with the terror toad. Wow, Zack said with a laugh when he saw Golder. I didn't really get a good look at him before, but Golder is really looking rather fabulous. The other Rangers shared a laugh while Harry nodded. I just wish my spell selection hadn't been so limited, or I could have taken him out of the fight more decisively. You think you could have beaten Golder with your magic? Jason asked, his arms crossed and slight disbelief on his face. Harry nodded, not really taking his eyes off the viewing globe, which was now playing the Rangers' final defeat of the terror toad. I partially crippled his combat effectiveness when I transfigured his sword, but nothing else really did more than annoy him. His armor may have protected him from some of my spells, but I'm confident that my more powerful spells could easily punch through and deal with him. Spells that you can't use right now because Rita has your wand, right? Trini asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Harry nodded. Yeah, and that does tie in quite nicely with your questions from after the battle, doesn't it? Excuse me for a moment. Without waiting for a response, Harry twisted in place and apparat the short distance to his hidden room. He still didn't feel quite ready to reveal its presence to the Rangers, and so he moved quickly to get the pinoctopus vine from his trunk and apparate back out to the middle of the consoles in the main room. So it's like this. Harry started once the Rangers had gathered around him once more. I know that my own ability to help against Rita's monsters is rather limited without a focus, so I was trying to come up with an alternative. Jason, you severed a pinoctopus vine that was trying to grab me, and while you were destroying the monster in your giant robots, I noticed that it had some residual magical energy in it. This most likely came from Rita using the Elder Wand to empower the monster. The point is, though, the magic within it was at least partially compatible with my own form of magic. Harry held up the coiled vine as he spoke. So you feel that you may be able to create a new focus from parts of one of Rita's defeated monsters? Zordon asked. Yes and no, Zordon, Harry responded. It was common practice in my world to use parts of magical plants and animals in a wand, but the magical energy in the vine is really rather weak. I think what I'm going to have to do is collect as many different sources of magical energy as I can find and try and make a hybrid core of sorts so that it can handle my magic without extreme consequences. What kind of consequences? Billy interjected, his face clearly showing interest. Harry grimaced. Best case failure? The wand just burns out or fails to work entirely. Worst case? It explodes and takes my hand with it. Seeing the looks of shock and concern on the Rangers' faces, he quickly moved to elaborate. But I'll be able to determine its compatibility before putting myself in a situation where that could happen. Looking to change the subject, Kimberly spoke up next. So that's why you grabbed the toad's horn then, right? To have another sample to make your new wand? Harry nodded as he pulled the horn from a pocket. That's right. This thing was the source of the Terror Toad's power, so it has a much more substantial amount of magic in it than the vine from the Pinoctopus does. I'll still probably need more samples, and maybe something of a more positive energy if possible. I have a feeling that a wand made only from Rita's monsters will be a bit more heavily inclined to dark magic than I'm comfortable with. What about the singing squash? Alpha interjected, unsteadily walking up while holding what looked like a hairy root. Would this serve to help you create a focus? We only needed a sample of its juices to create the antidote for Kimberly and Billy, and the rest will just end up going to waste. Harry reached out to touch the strange plant and immediately felt a small rush of magical energy. He smiled as he took it from the robot. Yes, this actually will help a bit. The energies are more neutral than anything else, but certainly closer to the light side of neutral. I may need to use more of this than other ingredients, but this could work to help balance out my focus, even though it doesn't have any of my own brand of magic in it. Thank you, Alpha. The robot seemed almost embarrassed as it backed away from Harry. It was nothing. He bumped into one of the consoles and quickly turned and began fiddling with the controls, probably just for something to keep himself occupied. Harry chuckled at the robot good-naturedly before Zordon got his attention once more. Very well, Harry. If you need anything further to help craft your new focus, please inform us. I'm sure we would be happy to add whatever we can to it. After a round of agreement, most of the Rangers just eager to see what he could do with a wand, Zordon spoke again. I understand that Harry had a question about your behavior during battle, Rangers, and that some of you expressed a similar curiosity. It is all very simple actually. I told you all that the morphing grid is sentient and influences those who use its power. It is this influence that causes you all to behave as you do while you are morphed. But why does it affect us like that? What's the point? Trini asked. Alas, I cannot say for certain. The only answer I have gotten from queries along these lines has been a general feeling of amusement. The morphing grid rarely deigns to communicate with anyone, and when it does, it is always up for interpretation. In any case, I have some good news for you, Harry. Alpha has completed your new identity in this world. Whenever you are ready, he can give you the identification papers so that you can start to make your life outside the command center. Wait, Zack stepped up, looking at Harry incredulously, apparently having disregarded the entire conversation about the morphing grid. You mean to tell me you haven't even been out of the command center yet? Harry gave a cautious nod. Aside from the carnival and the 2 monster fights, no. I've been here with Alpha and Zordon pretty much the whole time. Zack's face would have been funny if Harry weren't so taken aback. The teen seemed offended on Harry's behalf. Well, that settles it. As soon as you put your monster pieces away and get your ID, we're taking you to the youth center. If nothing else, it'll be good for you to eat something other than peanut butter sandwiches. Angel Grove Youth Center, gym, and juice bar. A rather large mouthful for the primary gathering place for most of the Angel Grove children and teens in the area. The place had it all, a sizable area designated as a gymnasium with various exercise machines around the periphery, a small arcade along one section of the wall, and a food court, all owned and operated by a rather happy man named Ernie. The Rangers and Harry teleported to an alley behind the building before making their way in and immediately seating Harry at a table big enough for the 6 of them by the railing that separated the gym from the food court. Harry sat with the girls while Zack, Billy, and Jason went to speak with Ernie and get their food. Apparently, since each of the teens volunteered at the youth center teaching classes or tutoring other students, they received some meals for free as long as they didn't take advantage of the privilege. They were all confident that Ernie would let them use this to treat Harry to a meal and a smoothie. Harry smiled as he looked around. If one ignored the clack of weights and the sound effects from the arcade games, the youth center reminded him quite a bit of the Great Hall at Hogwarts during the holidays. When there were no classes to be had, many of the students would gravitate to the hall to hang out with friends from other houses or just in an effort to get out of the common rooms. It was actually somewhat comforting for the man who won. He had known nothing but war and darkness for so long, it was rather refreshing to be in a place that allowed him to relax a bit. Compared to his last few days of monster battles and magic, it was nice to be able to experience a place that was somewhat normal. The boys quickly returned with food and smoothies for all, and Harry eagerly ate his sub sandwich, more than thrilled at having some variety in his meals after so many days eating only peanut butter sandwiches. Now that he had identification, Harry was determined to return to the youth center more often, especially once he had more than a few dollars in loose change to his name. Once everyone had eaten, the Rangers headed off to the locker rooms to change into more athletically appropriate clothing before moving out to the gym floor. Jason was lifting free weights while Zack and Billy casually knocked a volleyball over an indoor net. Kimberly was walking Trini through a few gymnastic exercises, spotting her as Trini did handstands, flips, and the like that Harry had no illusion of being able to mimic himself. They're a pretty good group of kids. You pick some good friends to fall in with. Harry turned from where he was watching the Rangers to see that Ernie had approached his table. The big man was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and loose black pants under his apron with a towel thrown over his shoulder as he smiled casually at the gym floor. He turned once more to face Harry and smiled. So you're Harry, right? Name's Ernie. I run the place. Harry shook Ernie's hand with a smile. I am indeed. Harry Potter at your service. English, eh? Ernie's smile grew slightly. I can't say I've ever been to England, but I've heard good things from some of my friends who have. Harry snorted. And I'm sure any native would tell you that most of it is overrated. Ernie laughed. Most likely. I suppose it's all in the eye of the beholder. So how'd you get involved with those 5? Harry shrugged, his mind racing. I just kinda ran into them one day and we just clicked, I guess. They're all rather fun to hang around, though this town is a bit on the crazy side. Ernie nodded. Yeah, those 5 have been friends for years. They're all good kids. Helping out anyone who needs it all the time. Teaching all the classes and stuff around here. Jason teaches a karate class and Zach teaches a dance class. Kimberly has aerobics and gymnastics that she teaches and Billy and Trini tutor students. I think Trini is looking to move into helping with Kimberly's gymnastics though. They've been doing a lot of that one-on-one stuff these last few weeks. And I can certainly understand your point of view on Angel Grove. Ever since Rita Repulsa started attacking us and the Power Rangers showed up, things have been crazy. But the Rangers haven't let us down yet. Most of us here have just put our faith in them and try and tell any visitors to do the same. As long as the Rangers are around, everything will be alright. Have you gotten the chance to see them yet? Harry gave a slow nod as he processed what Ernie had told him. I think I might have seen them a few days ago. I was at that carnival that Rita attacked and I saw some people in what looked like bright-colored spandex. Ernie nodded with a big smile. That was probably them. They're real heroes, I tell you. Not too many people like that nowadays. Ernie just stood there in silence for a few minutes as he and Harry just watched the kids and teens running around on the gym floor while Harry mused on Ernie laying praise on the same set of teens without realizing it. Finally, Ernie spoke again. Well, I have to get back to work. This place has gotten so popular lately that I just don't have the time to mingle with everyone like I used to. It was nice meeting you, Harry. I hope you enjoy your time here in Angel Grove. Thanks, Ernie, don't work yourself too hard. Harry smiled as Ernie returned to his domain behind the food court counter. He seemed like a really good man. Had to be if he was willing to run a place like this for all the children of Angel Grove. Kinda like Hagrid, only shorter and less hairy and hopefully less likely to try and adopt a baby dragon. Harry snorted at the mental image before he noticed a slight commotion taking place on the gym floor. 2 guys, one incredibly large and wearing a leather jacket and jeans and the other incredibly skinny and wearing some kind of dress coat with gray and black camo pants, had walked up to Kimberly and Trini, both of whom had looks of disgust on their faces. The skinny one walked up to Kimberly and wrapped one arm around her for a moment before she pushed her way free, her disgusted look only growing. Harry was debating on whether he should make his way over when he noticed Jason putting down his weights as he, Billy, and Zach moved to back the girls up themselves. What followed made very little sense to Harry. The 2 groups, the Rangers and the 2 new boys, exchanged several words with the newcomers showing more aggression, though Harry was too far away to hear anything they said. Then, Billy held up the volleyball he and Zach had been using and the bigger one took it. The 2 newcomers moved to face off against Billy and Zach on the volleyball court. The bigger guy served, Zach set it into the air and Billy spiked it right onto the head of the skinny one who staggered around in an over-exaggerated manner. The bigger guy, apparently trying to follow the ball, then crashed into the dazed skinny guy. They both somehow managed to crash into the net, pulling the poles down and getting themselves hopelessly tangled. Everyone started laughing as the 2 struggled for a moment before slumping in surrender. It wasn't more than a few moments, however, until the Rangers moved to free the 2 from the net and stand it back up. The 2 newcomers appeared to try and play it off as if they had meant to do it based on their body language and the high-pitched laughter from the skinny one, but nobody really seemed to buy it as far as Harry could tell. After noticing this themselves, they tried to unobtrusively make their way out of the gym. They only managed to attract more attention, however, due to their less than stealthy attempts until they finally reached the exit. Harry rolled his eyes as he took another drink of his smoothie and put the 2 strangers out of his mind for now. He needed to put some thought into what he was going to do now that he had an identity in this world. He knew he would be staying and working with the Power Rangers at least until he got the Elder Wand back. He refused to think of failure there, but what about afterwards? Without the boost from the Elder Wand, would the Rangers even need his help defeating Rita's monsters? He didn't know the answer for sure, but he needed to keep the possibility in mind. As he was now, he would flounder and collapse if he tried to make his way in society without help from the Rangers and Zordon, both financially and otherwise. After living so long in the magical world in his home dimension, he had no clue as to the daily nuances of non-magical life, and the disenchanting of the galleons was going nowhere fast. Without a focus to help remove the goblin enchantments, it was like trying to pick up a grain of rice with a tiny pair of tweezers while looking through an out-of-focus camera. Without the gold, he had no assets besides what he himself could find or create. Using magic to summon lost money wouldn't hold up in the long run. He needed to find a way to support himself just in case he was left without that help to rely on. No. But Harry. No. Come on, man, just. No. But I thought we agreed. There was no agreement involved on my part. We were discussing martial arts experience and I told you all I never had the opportunity to learn anything growing up. Then you decided that I was going to learn and the topic moved on before I got any more say in it. I really don't want to learn karate. I'm sorry, but I just don't have the interest or drive to make it a worthwhile effort on my part. It had been 3 weeks since the Terror Toad was dispatched and Harry first ventured into the more public areas of Angel Grove. It was a time of general normalcy for Harry, but that wasn't because Rita has been idle, oh no. It was because Harry had, for various reasons, been largely unable to help the Rangers in their battles. The first instance had been 4 days after the Toad, on Saturday. The youth center was gearing up for a dance that evening and the Rangers, plus Harry, were helping decorate. The 2 guys who had accosted Kimberly and Trini, who Harry had found out were the Bulk and Skull that Zach had mentioned, caused a disturbance when Bulk decided to try and ride a skateboard through the youth center. This proved to be a bad idea when he crashed into Ernie and the oversized cake he was carrying at the time. During the craziness as Ernie kicked the 2 out of the youth center, Billy literally bumped into a girl named Marge. As it turned out, Marge was another brainy type like Billy. Zach described it as a match made in heaven and Harry couldn't help but agree. Especially as the 2 had a similar level of vocabulary so they could understand each other without having to have someone like Trini there to translate, which would have killed the entire potential romance from the get-go. The 2 had agreed to go to the dance that evening together and decided to rendezvous a few hours beforehand. The problem was Marge didn't show, and when Billy did he was attacked by putties. After Harry and the other Rangers helped Billy, Zordon revealed that Rita's latest servant, a sorceress named Madame Woe, had captured Marge and was holding her in another dimension. The Rangers immediately went to rescue her, but Harry couldn't come along because he didn't have a foolproof way to protect his identity like the Rangers did. Apparently, apart from hiding their physical features, the Ranger suits were empowered by the morphing grid with a kind of misdirecting magic. This aura prevented anyone from drawing a connection between the Rangers and their teenage secret identities unless they were to openly tell them or morph in front of someone in plain sight. So Harry had to sit out the battle because of Marge's presence. Despite things being rather tense as the Rangers were almost immediately captured in Madame Woe's pocket dimension, everything worked out in the end. Madame Woe was defeated, Marge was freed, and Billy got to take the girl to the dance that evening. Billy had even managed to salvage some of the sapphire dust that had once been the source of Madame Woe's power before he had crushed the stone to free the others. He passed this highly magical substance on to Harry for use in his new wand. Harry had given the dance a miss, preferring to stay at the command center and work on his magical projects, though from the stories he was told by the Rangers the next day, mostly involving Bulk and Skull making fools of themselves again, he almost wished he had gone. The following Wednesday, Kimberly had made plans to go flying with her pilot uncle, Steve. Of course, Rita capitalized on this by slipping the man a sleeping potion that caused him to pass out mid-flight. This required Kimberly to fly the plane herself under Alpha's guidance via communicator, a task she was eventually able to do successfully. Harry had initially offered to try and guide the plane down with magic, but apparently Bulk and Skull were also on board, having talked their way into joining the flight before Kimberly could convince her uncle otherwise. Since those 2 were not guaranteed to stay unconscious by a sleeping potion, they had apparently fainted shortly after Steve lost consciousness. Zordon didn't want Harry to risk revealing his abilities near them. While Kimberly was having her troubles in the sky, Zach was apparently having troubles of his own. The Black Ranger had later regaled Harry with the tale of the love of his life, a girl named Angela, whom he had finally spoken to at the youth center that day. Jason had then told everyone about how Angela had shut him down rather abruptly from the get-go, much to Zach's chagrin. Taking advantage of Kimberly's plight, Rita sent a monster known as the Snizzard, some kind of strange snake-slash-lizard hybrid, to attack the city. It was overwhelming the Rangers with several smaller snakes that were wrapped around them, restraining them while draining their energy until Harry convinced Zordon to let him help. Wearing a full-body cloak and hood he had transfigured to at least partially hide his identity from bystanders, Harry operated in and used his Parseltongue talents and a few compulsion charms to free the Rangers and gain control of the monster. The Snizzard had then given him the Zapple apple, which was a metal sculpture shaped like an apple that rested on top of its head and was the source of much of its power. Without the apple, the other Rangers were able to destroy the monster with little difficulty once it broke free from Harry's control and long before Kimberly landed her uncle's plane at Angel Grove Airport. It was actually this battle that had led to Billy, with a vote of support from the other Rangers, crafting Harry his own communicator. Even Jason, despite his general distrust of Harry, had agreed that his abilities could be helpful and being able to get a hold of him immediately would be a good idea, just in case. The first one Billy made didn't last beyond the first spell Harry cast. The magical energy channeled through his arm for wandless casting easily shorted out the sensitive electronics in the watch. In fact, it took 3 more designs before Billy with some help from Alpha managed to make a properly shielded one so that Harry could still use his magic while wearing it, having taken cues from similar protections on the equipment in the command center. On the next Saturday, Trini had brought the 5 others to the youth center to meet her Uncle Howard. The man was apparently a genius chemist as well as a world-renowned martial artist. Trini had hoped that her uncle could help Billy, especially since he had been assaulted by Bulk and Skull that very day when they were trying to get more money for arcade games and his self-confidence was flagging. Uncle Howard had recently made a strange and powerful chemical that gave the means for anyone or anything that came into contact with it to become invisible. Desiring the formula for herself, Rita decided to take it. She sent a monster known as the Dark Warrior, a kind of knockoff ninja, to kidnap Trini's uncle and obtain the formula. The karate scientist, as Billy called him, was kidnapped by putties while he was helping Billy train to focus his martial arts skills to sharpen his mental energies. The Blue Ranger reported the kidnapping to the others as soon as he could. Harry had to stay at the command center during the rescue mission because of Uncle Howard this time. The man was forgetful, but Harry's magic would certainly stand out enough for him to remember it. Then, once the Rangers freed Howard, Rita grew the Dark Warrior and forced the Rangers to call their robots Zords. Zordon explained to battle him before Harry could act, meaning he was once again out of the loop. After the monster was defeated, Billy, having rejoined Jason's karate class just before meeting Trini's uncle, earned his yellow belt and was immediately set upon by Bulk and Skull. Howard used some of his invisibility formula to scare them away from Billy by making them think that the brainy teen was beating them down with just his mind. All in all, it was rather amusing. Harry could easily see why people found the random and varied misfortunes that befell Bulk and Skull so funny. Their reactions were simply priceless. Howard had taken Harry aside after Bulk and Skull left. The two had spoken for some time, just general conversation as far as he could tell, and afterward Howard had gone back over to Trini. Whatever he said to her had made her blush rather spectacularly before she hugged the man and he left. The final instance was on the next Thursday. Billy had devised and constructed some kind of mind-reading device. The entire thing was rather unimpressive to Harry, but then again he had been exposed to legilimency years before, so mind-reading was rather old for him. The experiment was doomed to failure, however, as Rita apparently had Squat, the fat blue creature Harry had noticed during the Pincotopus attack, sabotaged the device, and when Billy and Kimberly attempted to use it they switched bodies instead of being able to read each other's minds. Billy and Kimberly spent the next 24 hours or so in an incredibly awkward attempt to get through a day in the other's life with minimal success. Luckily for them, the problem with the machine was easily fixed in the end, despite Rita sending a magical genie to make another attempt to destroy them. The battle had been rather difficult. The genie initially wiped the floor with the Rangers, entrapping them in a web-like substance and almost annihilating them within a few seconds of their first encounter. They were saved at the last second, however, when Alpha teleported them back to the command center. After some advice and direction from Zordon, and after Harry collected some of the excess webbing stuck to their suits, the Rangers headed back out to fight once more, only for Rita to grow the genie as soon as they reached it. The monster was too powerful for the Rangers to defeat with the Megazord, the humanoid robot that their dinosaur robots combined to make, and they were nearly beaten before Zordon, Alpha, and Harry, mostly Zordon and Alpha, managed to destroy the magic lamp that provided the genie with his power. With his lamp gone, the genie vanished just before making the finishing blow on the Megazord, signifying another victory for the Power Rangers. Even if this one was closer than any of them liked. And so it came to the current day. It was the Saturday after the genie/body swapping incident, and the youth center was hosting the Angel Grove Martial Arts Expo, which the group was heading toward so Jason could compete in a tournament. The Rangers had decided to use this opportunity to segue into Harry needing to take some kind of martial arts lessons, specifically Jason's karate class. They were citing the conversation, such as it was, that Harry had had with Jason, Zach, and Trini while Billy and Kimberly were punked. Harry failed to see the relevance and made sure they knew that. "Hey, leave Harry alone, guys," Jason spoke up, surprising Harry with his support. Then the Red Ranger continued talking. He probably just doesn't want to have to learn from someone younger than him. And if he doubts he can do it, then he won't be able to succeed anyway. Jason had been saying passively aggressive things like this almost since the moment they had met, and it had only gotten worse after the Rangers handled a few monsters without his help. Harry knew exactly what was going on. Jason was intimidated by Harry. They were both natural-born leaders, but Harry had already been through his crucible in the form of the war against Voldemort. Jason was a Boy Scout, and his idealism and enthusiasm over his chance at being a superhero were not enough to stand before Harry's cold cynicism and experience forged in the fires of his own war. So Jason lashed out to try and maintain his position as leader of the team, a position that Harry in no way coveted, and Harry was forced to deal with it more than half the time the two spoke. This time, Harry decided to try and explain. It might at least get the rest of the group to lay off for a while. "You're not that much younger than I am, Jason. Not even a full year, truthfully. And I more than recognize that you are a capable teacher. The fact that you have as many successful students as you do makes that very clear. I also recognize that you can quite easily kick my sorry but from one side of Angel Grove to the other and back, so it isn't a question of your personal karate skills either. The thing is, the way I fight doesn't need martial arts to work. If I tried to learn anything like that, it could throw off everything I already know, and that could cost me in a battle. It could cost all of us if I hesitate or try to do too many things at once. With everything on my plate right now, I just don't have the time or longing to dedicate myself to learning karate." Kimberly and Trini exchanged a slightly distressed look before the Pink Ranger turned back to him with a pleading expression. "At least think about it, won't you, Harry? Just as a potential option?" "Yes," Billy added, "remember that I was hesitant to re-enroll myself in Jason's karate class, but I'm having a great deal more success than I had thought possible, and it has greatly aided me in our battles against Rita." Seeing him start to waver, Trini put a hand on his shoulder, bringing the entire group to a stop as Harry and Trini did. "Please, Harry. We just don't want you to need to know how to defend yourself without magic and not have it." Harry ran his eyes over the other Rangers, seeing Zach nod to him, Billy's supportive glance, Jason's carefully neutral mask, and Kimberly and Trini showing concern in their eyes finally broke him. All right, he sighed. "If it makes you feel better, I'll consider it. Maybe once I finish my focus project I'll be able to join Jason's class." The girls' smiles and Jason's careful eye roll showed that the discussion was tabled for now as the Rangers and Harry once more started toward the youth center. Conversation changed to other, more mundane things as they walked. Zach and Jason were discussing potential competition for the Red Ranger at the martial arts tournament while Billy listened intently and the girls stayed at the back of the group, whispering between themselves. It wasn't much longer after that before the group arrived at the youth center, unusually crowded due to the events of the day. Once they got inside, the group split up, Harry heading to the juice bar while the Rangers went with Jason so he could register to compete. Once at the bar, Harry was immediately spotted by Ernie. "Harry!" the friendly man shouted, getting his attention. Once he got closer, Ernie continued. "You're sure you don't mind watching the counter for me during the tournament?" Harry smiled. "It's fine, Ernie. I know how excited you are, seeing as you took particular care to arrange it. Go get yourself a good seat." "Great," Ernie smiled back, nearly dancing in excitement. "Everything should be stocked and ready, and if someone asks for something that isn't, you can get it from the back room. I'm going to go see if I can still find a ringside seat." With that, the man rushed off, nearly bowling over several teens in his excitement. Harry shook his head good-naturedly at Ernie's over-enthusiastic departure. The man had helped Harry a great deal these past weeks, but he was still quite the character. In fact, less than 2 weeks after first meeting him, the day after the snizzard had attacked, Ernie had given Harry a job. It wasn't much really, just having Harry around to help run the juice bar when it got exceptionally busy, but it was almost exactly what Harry needed. For Harry, having a job, even one as relatively simple as this, gave him an eventual excuse for the money he would have once he got his galleons decharmed and started selling them. For now though, the limited income kept him from having to summon loose change all the time. Ernie trained him to use the register and keep the different products stocked and was in the process of teaching Harry how to prepare the various items on the menu along with the other tasks that came along with maintaining the youth center. The only strange part in Harry's mind was in how flexible Ernie was on his hours. Harry had never had a regular job in his original world, but he was still familiar enough with the concept to know that Ernie was being incredibly lenient when he told him to just come in whenever you want to work. He then gave Harry a long, measuring look and told him, if anything ever comes up while you're working, you can leave on a moment's notice. I always plan on being here too, so you just let me know and you can take off. He had then looked him in the eyes and repeated anything with extra emphasis. Slight strangeness aside, the lack of mandated work hours and leniency of his boss would certainly come in helpful whenever a monster attacked and he was needed to help the Rangers fight it off. Harry had been coming into work whenever he could, usually arriving just before school let out and the initial crowd showed up on weekdays or a bit before noon on weekends. He was very much looking forward to his first paycheck, which was due on the upcoming Friday. It might not have much on it since it would only be for the single day he'd worked the previous week, but it was money that he earned himself as opposed to having summoned it with magic. Snapping out of his thoughts as a customer approached the bar, Harry filled a few orders as the sounds of the tournament beginning hit his ears. His time cooking the Dursleys' food had made him rather uniquely suited for working at a place like the Youth Center Juice Bar, not that he would ever thank his relatives for it even if the opportunity did somehow present itself. The mindless motions of food preparation that had once been so familiar to a younger Harry Potter allowed his mind to drift once more as his body ran on autopilot, this time to his wand crafting experiments. He had discovered rather quickly that he was correct in assuming the dark taint to the magical signatures of the items he had collected for his wand. With the exception of the singing squash, each of the items he had collected were at least somewhat more aligned to darker magics than he would like. Ironically enough, the most powerful such item, the dust from Madame Woe's sapphire focus, was the least dark while the genie's web-like substance was the most. This left him with the task of finding something more to balance out the energies in his future wand. After a week of pondering the topic, Harry had decided that instead of trying to make it more neutrally aligned, he would try and make it more specifically aligned to him. In theory, if the wand was linked more closely to him, the magical alignment of the focus wouldn't matter quite as much. This led to Harry adopting a nightly ritual of gathering a sample of his BLD and placing it under stasis charm before bed. He was unable to gather too much at once as he couldn't use wandless magic to heal any substantial wounds that would be needed for a sufficient bloodletting, and the nature of BLD magics required a certain level of risk and sacrifice that made using medical equipment to easily gain a sufficient amount a non-option, but he was making progress nonetheless. Combined with Alpha having gathered a selection of holly branches from various sources, Harry was hopeful he would be able to start on the actual crafting of his wand soon. It would be good for him to feel closer to his full ability again. Harry spent the next 30 minutes or so listening to the progressing martial arts tournament, catching occasional glimpses when he was able to look up from his work as the ring for the matches was easily visible from where he was. Even if Harry wasn't personally interested in learning any martial arts at the present time, that didn't mean that he didn't enjoy watching others practice it. From what he had been able to gather, there were 16 competitors in the tournament. This meant that there would be 4 rounds of elimination competition. Each fighter was awarded a point by the judge whenever they landed a solid hit on their opponent or when their opponent stepped out of bounds. Whichever fighter had the most points at the end of each 2-minute round would move on to the next fight. Most of the fights had been rather evenly matched, the only exceptions being in the case of 2 particular individuals. One of these 2 was Jason, who had been in one of the first fights and was steadily working his way up the left side of the bracket. This was rather unsurprising since the teen was considered good enough to teach karate. It only made sense that he would be a top contender in such a tournament. The other was, according to a few of the high school students gossiping near the bar, a new student who had just moved to the area named Tommy Oliver. He was clearly a fantastic martial artist as his fast and powerful strikes quickly overwhelmed most of his opposition fairly easily. He was working his way up the right side of the bracket and seemed a shoe-in for the finals as well. Around an hour after the tournament began, a short intermission was called before the finals featuring, as expected, Jason Scott and Tommy Oliver. Harry was moving quickly to help the sudden influx of customers during the lull in the excitement when Zach and Kimberly appeared at the counter. "Hey Harry," Zach called. "How about a bottle of water for our soon-to-be tournament champion friend?" Harry turned briefly from where he was mixing a smoothie for another customer. "You know I love you guys, Zach, but you're gonna have to wait your turn too." With a roll of his eyes, Harry turned his focus back to the mixer, but Zach was not to be denied. "Come on man, help us out here. Kimberly, back me up here Kimberly." The Pink Ranger was apparently not paying the slightest bit of attention to Zack and Harry's conversation, such as it was. Instead, she had turned her back to the counter, leaning against it almost casually, and was staring with a slightly blank look on her face back toward the tournament ring. "Yo! Earth to Kimberly," Zack said, waving his hand in front of Kimberly's dazed face. Harry just snorted in amusement and continued preparing orders. Kimberly let out a soft squeak before turning toward Zack. "Sorry about that. What were you saying?" Zack merely shook his head slowly. "Are you alright, Kim? You seemed a little zoned out there for a minute." "Yeah, I'm fine," Kimberly waved one hand airily as she spoke. I'm fine." Zack raised an eyebrow. "Right, anyway, I was telling Harry that he should help us out here. Support the team and all that." "Alright, is that all for you guys?" Harry smoothly slid over to Zack and Kimberly and put a chilled bottle of water on the counter, having dealt with the rest of the customers waiting while the two Rangers had their short discussion. Kimberly blinked at Harry before turning to Zack. "He seems rather eager to help to me." Zack let out an overly dramatic groan before shooting a smirk at her. "Well, if you hadn't been so busy eyeballing the competition, then you might have known what I meant." Harry fought down a smile as Kimberly's face turned bright red. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said after a moment before grabbing the bottle and starting back toward the ring. "Come on, Zack. Pay the man and let's go." Zack just chuckled and smiled at Harry as he dug out his wallet. "Women, man. Am I right?" Harry rolled his eyes as he took Zack's money and handed back his change. "She's got it bad, doesn't she?" Zack put his money away and called back over his shoulder as he started after the retreating Pink Ranger. "You have no idea, Harry." Laughing a bit, Harry finished up his last few orders as the rush died off and everyone headed toward the ring again, eager for the final match of the tournament. Harry had just finished cleaning up the last of the mess when the tournament announcer/judge spoke up again. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is time now for the final round of our martial arts tournament. Competitors Jason Scott and Tommy Oliver, please enter the ring." Finding his interest had finally been piqued, Harry shifted around until he found a spot along the counter where he could observe the upcoming match through the crowd. In all honesty, and as petty as it was, Harry would not have been upset to see Jason lose the match, what with the team's general hostility toward him since he had first arrived in the dimension. He knew, however, that it would take quite the fighter to be able to match Jason's skills, sharpened as they were in combat against Rita's forces. "Fighters ready?" the judge called out as he looked first to Jason and then to Tommy, receiving a nod from each in turn. "Fighting stance." The two teens took their preferred stances, both looking rather similar to Harry's untrained eye, though Tommy looked to be standing a bit lower than Jason. Seeing the two teens were ready, the judge brought his hand down between them. "Hajime." The two teens immediately began moving, attacking, and counterattacking in a rather easygoing manner. It took the first 30 seconds of the match before Harry realized they were testing each other, feeling out what the other fighter was capable of. Shortly after he came to that realization, Tommy struck out with a lightning-fast kick, knocking Jason to the mat. Moving quickly, Tommy crouched down by him and delivered a punch to his torso. "All right, back to center." The judge quickly intervened and the two teens moved back to their sides of the mat. "Judge's call, 1 point." The judge motioned toward Tommy and a scoreboard on the wall behind them changed to reflect the score. "Fighting stance. Hajime." This time Jason was clearly being the more aggressive of the two. Tommy seemed rather caught off guard as he was quickly forced out of bounds, resulting in the judge calling them back to center and awarding Jason a point. When the fighting resumed again, the match was half over and it was clear that both fighters were now ready to step up their games. Initially, Jason pressed his attack again with a quick step forward and a spin kick that Tommy easily ducked under. Trying to take advantage of this, the green-clad fighter tried to kick Jason's legs out from under him. Luckily, Jason had recovered from his kick enough to backflip over the attack and away from his opponent. Standing once more, Tommy quickly advanced on Jason, launching into his own tornado kick and continuing into another when Jason ducked under it. After the third such kick, Jason launched a side kick, landing a solid blow to Tommy's stomach and bringing the judge in to award Jason a point as Tommy fell to the mat. The next exchange started with Jason launching a flying kick that Tommy sidestepped as he moved forward, essentially switching their places on the mat. Jason moved in quickly, trying to use his foot to hook Tommy's legs out from under him, but Tommy merely mimicked Jason's own move from earlier and backflipped over the attack. Jason then tried to follow up with a tornado kick, but Tommy ducked the attack before catching Jason's uplifted leg with his own and taking them both to the mat with Tommy in a superior position, ending in him getting another point. Harry caught sight of the other Rangers standing in Jason's corner as the judge reset the two fighters. They were looking rather uneasy all things considered. Apparently they had hoped Jason would have an easier time of the match and Tommy's skill was catching them off guard. Though based on her earlier behavior, Kimberly could be worried on Tommy's behalf instead of Jason's. The thought made Harry chuckle to himself as he shook his head slowly. Ah, young love. The third exchange of the second half of the match started with an almost expected tornado kick from Tommy that Jason ducked before shifting around behind him, once more switching their positions. Before Jason could react further, Tommy moved in again with a flurry of blows that clearly caught the Red Ranger off guard as he was almost easily taken down to the mat and received a blow to the chest for his efforts. It took Jason a moment longer to rise again after this blow, but he still dutifully made his way back to his side of the mat for the judge to restart the fight as the clock continued to wind down. This time, Tommy easily ducked under Jason's kick before pressing his advantage yet again. He launched another series of kicks followed by another flurry of punches that served to force Jason out of bounds as he tried to avoid them, earning Tommy another point. By this time the other Rangers were clearly distressed as Jason was down by 2 points now. They began shouting what Harry assumed were calls of encouragement to their friend and team leader, though Harry couldn't hear exactly what they were saying from the juice bar. Jason started the next exchange with another pair of tornado kicks. Tommy almost seemed resigned to it at this point as he ducked under the first two but was caught off guard when Jason switched tactics. Instead of a third spinning kick, Tommy ended up ducking right into a strong side kick that caught him in the chest and knocked him to the mat. The judge quickly moved in again, resetting the fighters and awarding the point to Jason. With only 5 seconds left, Harry could tell that Jason was feeling the pressure. Tommy moved in first in what would be the final exchange of the fight, leading with a straight kick that Jason deflected followed by a hooking punch that he ducked. Jason then stood quickly, bringing his foot up to land in Tommy's stomach followed by another quick kick to his chest. Harry's eyes narrowed as he felt the slightest pulse of power coming from the second hit that lifted Tommy into the air a few feet. Tommy flipped over in the air before crashing back down to the mat where Jason landed a solid punch to his stomach just as time ran out and a bell rang signifying the end of the round. The wizard crossed his arms and sighed as the judge awarded Jason another point and declared the final match a draw. He seriously doubted that Jason had intentionally channeled any ranger power into his attack, but the fact remained that it had happened. That it could happen at all was rather troubling in the first place though. He resolved to keep an eye on things and perhaps have a word with Zordon about it. He was broken out of his thoughts when Billy, Kimberly, Zach, and Trini came up to the counter with rather glum looks on their faces. Zach was first to speak up. "Man, did you see that?" Jason almost had it. "Are you sure you were watching the same fight?" Harry responded with a teasing smile as he walked closer to them. "From my point of view it looked like Jason made an incredible comeback in the last 10 seconds of the match just to pull off that tie. That Tommy guy was really good." Billy nodded but said nothing as Zach leapt to his friend's defense. "And if it had gone on another 10 seconds Jason would have won." Harry raised his arms in a placating gesture. "I'm just saying, Zach, Tommy put up more of a fight than Jason was expecting. They both put on a good showing either way." Ever the peacemaker, Trini spoke next. "Yeah, and now maybe Jason can work out a way to have a sparring partner more on his level. I know that none of us have ever been able to stand on even ground with him like that." Zach seemed to consider that for a moment before his smile returned. "Hey, you're right. Maybe now we won't end up bruised as much when Jason needs his practice." "Is it that bad?" Harry asked with concern in his voice. No, Zach quickly said, realizing how it had sounded. "Jason is just way more skilled than the rest of us. Some of what you learn in any martial art becomes a reflex and you act before you think. That has happened to each of us a few times when we spar with Jason. He acts before he thinks when he gets in the zone." "Ah," Harry nodded. "I can kinda see where that could be a problem. It was that way for me when I was being taught back home. One of my teachers in particular, a guy named Moody, was of a school of thought that suggested holding back only taught bad habits. I can't tell you how many injuries I got out of sparring with him." Harry's brow creased as he glanced around for listeners while the Rangers chuckled at him. It wasn't easy keeping things secret while talking in public and still getting the message across. "Don't worry, Harry," Trini assured him in a whisper. "You get used to the double talk and such after a while. It gets easier with practice." Harry shot her a small smile. "You would think that I'd be used to this kind of thing, but since my war was almost completely in secret, well, I didn't really spend time around many people who weren't in on the whole thing anyway." Conversation drifted from that point. There was a bit more speculation on whether or not Tommy might be willing to be Jason's sparring partner if asked, but soon the Rangers began discussing school and projects while Harry had to help an occasional customer until Ernie returned. By the time Jason joined the group, freshly showered and back in his everyday clothes, Zach was back to less than subtly teasing Kimberly about her apparent attraction to Tommy while Billy remained oblivious and Trini frowned slightly. Declining an invitation to join the Rangers in the park, Harry resumed working. He put his thoughts about Jason's fight on a back burner for the time being. It was no use worrying about it until he had a chance to talk to Zordon. As it turned out, there was absolutely nothing to worry about. According to Zordon, random bursts of morphing energy were somewhat common with teams of Rangers in the past. Whenever a Ranger was distressed or being pushed to or beyond their limits, they might call upon the power subconsciously. It had happened before and never in an obvious way. In fact, if it weren't for Harry's own sensitivity to magical energies, he may not have even noticed it. The point though was that Jason likely didn't even realize what had happened, and both Zordon and Harry agreed that informing him, or any of the Rangers for that matter, would serve no constructive purpose. The last thing Harry needed or wanted was to give Jason another reason to dislike him, and accusing him of cheating may turn the entire team against the dimensionally displaced wizard. So, with his thoughts put to rest, Harry headed back to his room and continued work on his new wand. Thus far he had reduced the pinoctopus vine and the singing squash down to a few long threads of plant matter with as much of their inherent magics concentrated into them as possible. The genie's webbing was already rather magically charged, and Madame Woe's power crystal was nicely crushed into a fine powder, so those two components were as prepared as they could be. That left the Terror Toad's horn and the Zapple apple to deal with. Harry already had something of an idea for how to construct this wand. First he would have to find which of the holly branches resonated with him the best. Then, he would carve out the body of the wand and hollow out the center, most likely by splitting it vertically in half and trusting in his magic to fuse it together again after the fact. The plant fibers and webbing would then be bundled with several lengths of his own hair, tying them together, and then coated in a paste-like mixture of his BLD, the crushed sapphire and some of the toad's horn, ground to a similar consistency. The metal of the Zapple apple was highly conductive for magical energies, so he was planning on melting it down and lining the hollow of his future wand with this metal before placing the core bundle and sealing it together. It would end up being a rather rough job once he finished, and would likely give a real wandcrafter a heart attack if one were to see it, but in theory it would result in a working magical focus. Shaking his head, Harry put his thoughts aside and, sitting at his desk, pulled the horn closer. He would have to cut or break several sections off of it before grinding it with a transfigured mortar and pestle to get the proper consistency to use it. With a sigh, Harry got to work. Harry worked on a small piece of the Terror Toad's horn for the rest of the evening, finding the substance surprisingly resilient to his efforts. He had managed to grind it down enough to make use of it, but the amount yielded was far less than he would have liked for the time and effort put into it. This task would continue all throughout the following day, leaving Harry to collapse Sunday night with the majority of his work on the horn done, but with his body expressing its disapproval quite acutely. Waking somewhat later than usual on Monday morning, Harry broke his fast before deciding to jump right back into it, working on what should be the final necessary section of horn despite his arms and shoulders still screaming from the exertion. It was the biggest downside of wand crafting like this: you couldn't use magic to directly create or prepare any part of it or run the risk of ruining that particular component. It was actually the main reason that more people didn't make their own wands, from what Moody had told him. They instead relied on pre-made wands like Ollivander's, even though personally designed ones had a good chance of being better matched to each witch or wizard. Harry had nearly finished his work at 4 in the afternoon when Zordon contacted him on his communicator and asked him to come out to the main room. Eager for a break despite how close he was to being done, Harry quickly made his way out. "What's going on, Zordon?" "Thank you for coming, Harry. I fear there may be a problem in Angel Grove and none of the Rangers are available to investigate it." Zordon's reply was somewhat grim and it set Harry on edge, his finely honed sense of danger telling him things were about to get bad. "Sure," he nodded. "I can check it out for you. Where do you need me to go?" Our sensors indicated the presence of a group of putty patrollers appeared in an alleyway near Angel Grove High School a short time ago. Before we could take any action, the signal vanished. Then, moments after, a very powerful magical signature indicated that a spell was cast, most likely by Rita herself. "I would ask that you investigate this alleyway for any clues as to what may have happened." Harry nodded. "All right, I can do that. But how do we know that she wasn't setting some kind of a magical trap for one of us to set off?" Zordon's face only seemed to grow more troubled. "Because, Harry, the magical signature was that of a very powerful teleportation spell, but one to take something away from Earth, not bring something here." Harry's eyes narrowed. "You think she kidnapped someone? One of the Rangers maybe?" Zordon shook his head. "No. All of the Rangers are accounted for. They are merely tied up with their family and after-school obligations. If you are still willing, Alpha will teleport you to the alleyway so you can search for clues. At Harry's answering nod, Zordon once more thanked him and gave Alpha the go-ahead. Aye. Please be careful, Harry. Alpha said in his chronically distressed-sounding voice as he activated the teleporter, and Harry was surrounded by a white glow before flying up and out of the command center. The first thing Harry did upon his arrival was cast a Notice Me Not charm on himself to prevent any pedestrians from interfering. The first thing he noticed was that the alley looked like someone had been trashing it rather thoroughly. There were several trash bags that had been split open, as well as large cardboard boxes that were smashed. A lone trash can lid lay rather conspicuously in the middle of the alley, bent all out of shape. The now familiar six-tone beep of his communicator brought Harry out of his musings. Harry, have you discovered anything? Zordon's deep voice came from his watch, and Harry rolled his eyes. He must be worried if he's already calling when Harry had barely been there for 10 seconds. Harry brought the watch up near his face and pushed a small button on the side, answering the call. Yeah, Zordon. Someone trashed this place pretty good. Smashed boxes and trash bags are split open all over the place. Hang on. Harry's eyes caught on a bright green shoulder bag with a black strap that was partially hidden under some loose newspaper. What is it, Harry? What do you see? Zordon's voice grew in urgency, his worry even more apparent. It looks like someone's school bag, Harry said slowly as he opened the bag, seeing a few textbooks and other school supplies. He pulled out a math book and opened the cover, seeing a list of previous owners written on the inside, running his finger down the list until he got to the newest. And according to this, they belonged to Tommy Oliver. Zordon was silent for a moment, almost making Harry think he had broken off the communication. Finally, he responded. You should bring the bag back to the command center, Harry. I fear I might know what has happened, though I need to meditate on it before informing anyone. Keeping secrets doesn't help anyone, Zordon. Especially not in potentially tense and dangerous situations. I will inform everyone of my suspicions once I am certain that I am right, Harry. I ask that you trust me for now. If you say so, Harry reluctantly replied as he repacked and closed the bag before picking it up. I guess I'm ready for teleportation back whenever you guys are. All right, Harry, Alpha's voice responded. Teleporting now. Deep in his gut, Harry knew that this had been important. He just hoped that Zordon got the chance to share his theory before the SHT hit the fan. As it turned out, Zordon did not, in fact, have the chance to share his potential discovery with anyone. He was too busy getting his butt kicked. The first sign Harry received that something was wrong came while he was finishing up grinding the last bit he hoped of Terror Toadhorn he would need for his new focus. It wasn't really a sign that could be missed either. It was rather difficult to mistake Zordon's near-panicked shouting and the various pops and explosions coming from the main room of the command center as anything but trouble. Harry burst out of his hidden room in time to see a figure in what looked like a Green Ranger suit with a golden chest piece and golden armbands. The unidentified Ranger was ripping the consoles open and tearing out the internal wiring while Zordon pleaded for him to stop. In retrospect, Harry thought, I probably should have come out with my invisibility cloak on. This line of thought was inspired by the fact that the figure was now staring right at him. Or at least Harry supposed he was, since the individual in question had the same kind of full-face helmet the other Rangers did that made it rather difficult to tell what they were looking at specifically. Who the bloody hell are you? Harry demanded, pulling his magic up as he shifted away from the door to his room. He was moving to his left, where he could see Alpha standing while slumped forward, unresponsive. Ah, the figure said in a somewhat deep voice with a bit of a sinister lilt to it, as if he was trying as hard as he could to sound evil. You must be the magic user that Zordon's pathetic Power Rangers recruited. Empress Rita warned me about you. Empress Rita? Harry questioned in an attempt to keep him talking. Zordon had gone quiet moments after Harry had stepped out, but the wizard didn't have time to look. He had a feeling that taking his attention off the intruder was probably one of the worst things he could do at the moment. Yes, Empress Rita, the man nearly shouted. She is the future ruler of Earth. I am her Green Ranger and she is my queen. Mate, it sounds like you got smacked upside the head with something. There's nothing royal about that bloody bint other than being a royal pain in my backside. Enough of your slander of Empress Rita, the Green Ranger shouted before leaping toward him, easily clearing the smoking console between them, and drawing back for a flying punch that would leave Harry nothing but a smear on the command center wall. At least it would have if he hadn't operated away at the last moment, reappearing with a pop in the center of the consoles where the Green Ranger had just been standing. Twisting around to face his opponent, Harry sent a full-body bind at him, smiling in satisfaction as it hit him in the back and washed over his chest piece. His satisfied smile was quickly removed from his face as the Green Ranger began laughing. You think your pathetic spells can affect me? He easily stood from the partial crouch he had been in after landing and slowly turned to face Harry once more. My Empress has used her magic to protect me from anything you can do. My shield is especially resistant to your pathetic powers. Great, Harry thought. He's resistant to my magic. Rita must have given him a supercharge through the Elder Wand for him to have this much resistance without magic of his own though. Harry's thought process was cut off as the Green Ranger vanished in a blink of green light only to reappear right in Harry's face moments later. Before he could react, Green grabbed the front of his shirt and lifted him into the air with one arm. From all that Golder warned me about you, I expected more of a challenge. Are you prepared to meet your end? Oh, I'm far from done, mate. Harry summoned a loose panel from the console behind the Green Ranger, sending it flying forward to smash into the back of his head, making him stumble. Harry used the Ranger's momentary lack of balance to cast a wandless banisher, breaking his hold on Harry's shirt and sending him back into the console that had just assaulted him. Harry dropped to the ground in a crouch, idly summoning a small chunk of metal from one of the destroyed consoles as he did and tapping it with a finger, making it glow blue for a moment. Green took no time at all to recover, quickly standing and making his way over to tower over Harry's crouched form. Just give up, wizard. You are nowhere near powerful enough to take me down. Empress Rita's total victory has been assured from the moment she recruited me into her army. If you say so, Harry mumbled before throwing himself backward, landing on his back and tossing the fragment of metal at the Green Ranger. Catch! Out of reflex the Green Ranger did just that, only to disappear as his touch activated the port key Harry had thrown. Harry immediately threw his arms out, letting his magic flow from him as rapidly as it could and guiding it to form a dome over the command center. It was a kind of rudimentary ward he had once been shown that would, hopefully, prevent access from a specific party, in this case the Green Ranger. Mere moments after he got the ward up he felt an impact from outside. Since the ward was anchored on him, he felt the full strain of the pressure that Green was putting on his protections in his attempt to re-enter the command center. The strain would have brought him to his knees if he hadn't already been there. If he had had any doubt before that the Green Ranger was empowered by the Elder Wand, then it was settled in that moment. Harry very much doubted that Rita's Ranger would ever be able to use expressed magic as Harry did, but the familiar pressure of magic at the levels he was feeling, corrupted though it was by Rita's own power, confirmed that successfully using direct magic on him would be nearly impossible. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably closer to 10 minutes, Harry felt the pressure caused by Green's attempts to re-enter the command center stop. Harry nearly collapsed in relief, avoiding it through sheer willpower alone, before his attention was brought to the viewing globe which had lit up seemingly on its own. Well played, wizard. Green's helmeted face appeared in the globe as his voice echoed around the room. You have successfully kept me out of the command center this time, but I shall return. And when I do, nothing will stop me from destroying the Power Rangers and all that ally themselves with them. Then the image vanished, leaving the viewing globe blank once more. Slowly and unsteadily, Harry stood once more and looked around the command center as he let his ward collapse, drawing the excess magic back into himself. He saw Alpha still standing where he had first seen him and still slumped over. Around half the consoles were trashed, their tops ripped open and the wires and circuits within torn out, though it probably would have been worse if Harry hadn't come out of his room when he had. At least none of the consoles were burning. His thoughts were once more derailed, this time by Zordon's voice. Harry must Rangers read a coin to Green. Zordon's giant head in the tube was flickering in and out of view, the edges blurrier than normal even when he was visible. His voice kept cutting out, making it hard for Harry to make out more than one word out of several. Zordon, I can't understand you. What's going on? Who was that guy? Harry's shout seemed unheard on Zordon's end as he just kept talking. Together defeat strong the you. Zordon's face then blinked out one final time and stayed that way. Ah bloody hell, Harry mumbled before glancing over the room again. Jason is gonna flip when he sees this place and hears what happened to Zordon, Harry sighed. Oh well, I guess there's nothing to do but call them in. Reluctantly but knowing he had no real choice, Harry brought his communicator up near his face and activated it. Guys, it's Harry. We've got a bit of situation. Luckily enough, the Rangers had all been together when Harry called them. The problem there was that Green had managed to destroy enough of the control consoles that teleportation was down so they couldn't get to the command center through their normal methods. Harry offered to apparate to them and bring them in one at a time, but Trini had immediately vetoed the idea. She still hadn't gotten over her own short trip via apparition during the Terror Toad battle and was not at all eager for a repeat performance. In the end, the Rangers ended up coming in Billy's car, which he had named the Rad Bug. Apparently it was a project of his that he had finished some time before and had helped the Rangers the last time they had teleportation troubles. When Harry asked how a car would be able to help them, he was told that Billy had created a mechanism that allowed the car to fly. So it was that an hour or so after Green had been forced out of the command center, the Rangers flew down the roof usually used for teleportation and landed in a small silver car. It was a rather simple vehicle, all said and done, mostly smooth curves and slopes along the body. The only obvious changes Billy must have made were a box on the front bumper and some kind of dome on the hood and roof, the latter of which was connected to a barrel-shaped device on the back by a long tube. Almost immediately after the teens got out of the car, Harry's prediction was proven correct. "Look at this place," Jason was the first to speak as he got out of the front passenger seat. Harry stood from behind one of the center consoles where he had been gathering the wires and other components together in the hopes that Billy would be able to fix them. Jason spotted him and immediately advanced toward him threateningly. "What did you do, Harry?" Rolling his eyes, Harry sent a leg locker curse at Jason, sending the teen to the ground when his legs snapped together and his knees locked. "All right then," Harry said with a false smile on his face. "Now that Jason's paranoid ranting has been cut off, what can you guys tell me about the Green Power Ranger that was in here not even an hour ago tearing up everything?" "Green Power Ranger?" Kimberly asked as she, Billy, and Trini moved to look at some of the destroyed computers, their concern for Jason overwhelmed by their shock at the destruction before them. Zach had moved to help prop Jason up when Harry spoke but nearly dropped him in shock after Harry's comment. "What do you mean?" Seeing that Zach had a hold of Jason, Harry cancelled his spell and turned to the others. "I mean, there was a guy with a Green Ranger suit that was in here tearing up the consoles. I think he did something that must have messed with the teleportation function of the communicators. Whoever it was, he also managed to fry Alpha and disconnect us from Zordon." "Zordon's gone," Kimberly shouted as her attention quickly switched to the conspicuously empty tube. "Yeah," Harry said with a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "He tried to say something just after I kicked Green out, but I couldn't understand it. His voice kept skipping out or something like a bad connection?" Billy interjected, holding a severed end of a cable that had been in front of the console closest to Zordon's tube. "Yeah, I suppose so," Harry answered as the other Rangers gathered around him and Billy, Jason shooting him a glare as he did so. "That makes sense." Billy nodded, closely examining a cable in his hand before leaning over the console once more. "This cable is the primary information conduit for the transdimensional communication system that allowed Zordon to speak with us. Without it, the signal would have lost integrity fairly quickly. That doesn't even take into account the rest of the damage done here." Billy trailed off and Zach shot a look to Trini, who rolled her eyes. "With that cable ripped out like it is, Zordon can't talk to us." "Okay, so can you put it back in?" Jason asked. "Not exactly," Billy answered slowly. He was about to continue but Alpha chose that moment to start moving again. "Power Rangers. Power Rangers. Intruder alert. Intruder alert." The robot was speaking in a more mechanical voice than usual and his tone was constantly fluctuating. "Must contact Power Rangers. Must contact Power Rangers. Alpha." Billy shouted in eerie parallel to Harry's first meeting with him. The Blue Ranger quickly put the cable down and moved over to the staggering and flailing robot with the others right behind him. "What happened to him?" Kimberly asked, looking between the apparently suffering robot, Billy, and Harry as she did. "I don't know," Harry trailed off. "He was already down when I found the green guy and I didn't have a chance to check on him. This is the first time he's moved since then. Besides that, my mechanical know-how is effectively zero, so I figured I should wait for you guys before trying anything." "Can't you, magic everything back to one piece or something?" Zach asked him in concern. Harry shook his head. "Not as such, no. My magic and complex technology don't mix together very well. You guys might remember Billy making my communicator and how the first one shorted out and the second one exploded? Yeah, imagine that on a larger scale if I tried to fix things in here. Not really a good idea. I'd probably finish the job Green started if I tried any direct magic on the computers." The other Rangers paled at the thought, save Billy, who was busy looking over Alpha. "Yeah," Zach finally said. "I see how that could be bad. What did happen though?" Harry sighed. He couldn't see any other recourse than to reveal his hidden room to them. If he didn't, Jason would probably continue to assume that he had been the one to destroy the command center. At least until Green made an appearance in Angel Grove anyway. Harry pointed toward the hidden doorway. "I made a secret room of sorts in the command center," he could tell the moment the Rangers were finally able to see the door. Their focus on the spot that he was pointing to and the fact that he had mentioned the room allowing them to see past the Notice Me Not enchantment. "I was in there working on the focus components that have been collected when I heard something going on out here. I came out, saw the green guy, we fought, I magicked him out of the command center and threw up a temporary ward to keep him out and then called you guys when he stopped trying to get in." You know you might have been able to beat him if you were taking karate lessons, Zack hedged, a hint of a smile on his face. Harry could see that he was trying to bring a sense of levity to the otherwise tense situation, but Harry wasn't up for it. I seriously doubt that, Zack, and this is probably not the best time for that topic again. Everyone was quiet for a moment as Billy turned back to Alpha. Finally, he gave a short exclamation of surprise and discovery before pulling a disc out of a slot on Alpha's back. The response was immediate. "Oh, Power Rangers, you're here. And Harry, you're alright too. Ay. What happened?" "To the command center." Everyone smiled once Alpha returned to a semblance of normality, but Kimberly quickly returned to the topic at hand. "Alpha, do you know who did this to you?" The robot paused for a moment before speaking again, his voice reflecting his confusion. "All my memory chips seem to have been scrambled. No recollection." Billy nodded and waved the disc. There must have been a virus on this disc that affected his systems. Jason turned back to Harry, a frown of concentration on his face as concern danced in his eyes. "Harry, you said it was a Green Ranger who did this, right?" At Harry's nod, he continued. "So what can you tell us about this guy then?" Harry shrugged as he leaned against the edge of a destroyed console. "Not much, I'm afraid. I'm fairly sure it is a boy under the suit based on his voice and body type. I know he seems to worship Rita and claims to be her Green Ranger, and has at least some level of martial arts training, but that's almost a given with the suit, seeing as I doubt Rita would choose someone who couldn't fight to battle against you lot. His suit also gives him an unreal level of resistance to my magic. I hit him with a kind of paralysis spell and it did absolutely nothing. I'm fairly certain that Rita supercharged him with magic through the Elder Wand. I used a magical transport device to get him out of the command center, but it didn't take him as long as I had anticipated to start trying to get back in. My guess is that it dropped him out of transit somewhere between here and the destination I set. So he's not completely immune, but I seriously doubt that most direct magic will affect him, and anything that does probably won't work as well or last as long as it should." "Great, so we have a martial artist who is magically resistant," Trini said with a sigh, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Hey, no worries guys," Jason interjected, taking a step forward and standing up straight. "Harry just said his magic isn't completely useless against him, and we've beaten powerful fighters before. We'll beat this guy too." "Yeah, but every other time we've had Zordon to help us," Zack reminded everyone. "We don't have him this time." Alpha had his own answer for that. "Billy and I can get started on repairing the computers right away, and then I will try to re-establish contact with Zordon. With luck, I should be able to find him within a few hours of the computers getting fixed. And in the meantime we'll stay ready." Jason nodded. "Rita can attack at any time, especially since she's gotta know that we're crippled right now. We just need to be ready to show her that we're down, but not out." Seeing the other teens around him taking heart from Jason's words made Harry smile inwardly. Say what you will about Jason's corny speeches, they did their job. Taking a deep breath, Harry perked up. "Right, well I'll be getting back to it then." "What are you going to do?" Kimberly asked. "I thought you said you couldn't use your magic to help fix things here." "I can't," Harry said. "But I can get back to work on my wand. I should be able to finish it fairly soon if my guess is right." Looking over at where Billy and Alpha were already hard at work on the computers, Trini spoke up. "Do you mind if we watch? There's not much we can do out here to help these two, so." Harry looked over Jason, Zack, Kimberly, and Trini before shrugging. "I suppose so. Just be warned, it's probably gonna be rather boring for you." Moving quickly, Harry reached the door to his room first and slipped through while the door was still swinging open, disillusioning the cot before any of the others could see it. He may have had to tell everyone about the room, but they didn't necessarily need to know he slept there too. By the time the four Rangers entered his room, he was sitting at his desk with various transfigured glass containers with each of his selected wand components sitting against the wall at the back of the desk. Directly in front of him was his chosen piece of holly and a transfigured knife. "This is actually kinda cool," Kimberly commented when she walked into the room, looking around the black walls and at his sparing furniture. "Kinda simple but not bad. Don't know that I should have expected much else from a boy though." She and Trini shared a smile while Harry rolled his eyes. "Here," Harry offered after a moment, grabbing a few spare stones he had piled next to his desk and levitating them toward the four Rangers who hadn't stepped too far away from the door. A few feet from each Ranger, the stones were transfigured into simple wooden chairs that settled to the ground in front of them. "I don't usually entertain much in here, so I don't have much in the way of furniture." With a small snort of laughter, Zack grabbed his chair and dragged it over near Harry's desk before spinning it around and sitting with his arms resting on the back. "So, what are you working on now?" As the other Rangers settled their own seats nearby, Harry picked up the piece of holly and showed it to the others. This is the piece of wood I'm going to carve the body of my wand with. I plan on letting my magic guide me in this instance, so I probably won't be much for conversation. Once I have the body carved out, I'm going to split it down the middle and hollow it out, put the core in, and then seal it back together. If all goes well, then I'll have a working wand. And what if it doesn't go well? Jason asked. Harry sighed. As I said earlier, it could do nothing, it could explode, and most anything in between. Whatever happens, I'll probably be very, very disappointed. If I had to take a guess, based on the all-involved circumstances, I'd say it's most likely to just not channel any magic at all when I try to use it. So there's a chance that it won't even work? Kimberly looked affronted at the mere thought. Harry shrugged. Yeah, I've never actually had to craft my own wand. Before I got the Elder Wand when I finished Voldemort, I had a wand that I had used since I started my schooling. That one was destroyed just before I left my original world. During the war, I had that one through it all, so even though I was taught how to make my own, there was never cause to use those lessons. The others didn't seem to know how to respond to that, so Harry shrugged again and closed his eyes. I'm going to channel some of my magic into this wood and then start carving. This particular piece is actually surprisingly accepting of my magic, so if nothing else I'll have a good body for the wand. Once the wood is magically charged, the magical energy itself will guide me as I carve. I'll be in a kind of trance, so that's why I won't be much for conversation. Not hearing any complaints or comments, Harry focused his magic and let his senses wander as he picked up the knife from his desk. All in all, the carving process, guided by his magic, took a bit over an hour. Harry was only aware of the passage of time in the vaguest of senses. The rangers who had joined him in his room had begun talking after a short while, and the background noise was a somewhat pleasant diversion for the part of Harry's mind that wasn't taken up by his task. When he finally replaced the knife on his desk, the clack of metal on wood attracting the ranger's attention, he was left holding a wooden rod nearly 12 inches long that was glowing faintly in his hand. The entire thing was rather thicker than any wand he had used in the past. It lacked the defined handle and gentle slope to a point of most Ollivander wands. Instead, it was more like a baton that maintained its 1-inch diameter for the majority of its length before abruptly angling to a point about an inch from the end. That's gonna be your wand? Zach asked, incredulity showing in his voice. Kimberly wasn't impressed either. Yeah, it kinda looks more like a glow stick with a point right now. Harry gave a rueful smile. I'll admit it's not exactly what I was thinking when I envisioned it either. Most wands I saw in my old world were much more streamlined, and not just because they were professionally made. The general shape of this thing is off from what I'm used to. But if everything goes right, it should still work all the same. And honestly, the extra size would probably work better for the number of core ingredients I have to put in it. So you said you have to split it in half now, right? Trini asked. How do you plan to do that? Harry smiled and sent a pulse of his magic into the wood again. With a soft crack, the wood split smoothly in half along the grain. Like this. Harry smirked as the rangers stared, confusion written in their eyes. How? Kimberly started. Magic. Harry cut her off with a smile before chuckling at the glare she shot him before he started hollowing out a groove on each half of the wand. Once Harry finished preparing one half of the wand, he took a short break to finish work on one of his other components, in this case the Zapple apple. With a few simple transfigurations, he had a magical fire in a contained and protected space that was heating the apple over another container that would collect the molten metal and hold it in stasis so that it wouldn't fully solidify before he was ready. Luckily enough, it turned out that whatever kind of metal the apple was made of melted rather easily, as the entire thing was liquid by the time he finished preparing the other half of the wand's body. All in all, the entire process only took 30 minutes. Also during that time, Billy dropped in for a moment, both to see what Harry was working on and to report that he and Alpha had managed to at least get the teleporters partially running. They would only work when they were morphed, something about the extra energy provided by their coins helping the process along, but it was better than nothing. He did say that the console connecting to Zordon's communication device was much more damaged than they had originally thought, which is why they put it off to work on the teleporters first. After all, if Rita's forces attacked and they couldn't get there to stop them, then they'd be out of luck. It wasn't like the Power Rangers could fly the rad bug into battle after all. You know, Harry said once he confirmed all his components were ready. If I had things my way, I wouldn't be doing this all at once. What do you mean, Harry? Trini asked while the others looked on curiously. I mean that I wouldn't be trying to do this all in one go. Carve the wand body one day and finish the final ingredient prep another. Get the solid core together and assemble the whole thing on a third and fourth day. Spread things out so I'd have less of a chance of messing things up due to stress. Freaking Green Ranger. Just then, the alarm klaxons in the command center went off. A bugger, Harry slammed his head into the desk in front of him. Sorry all, I think I may have jinxed us. Rangers. Rangers. Alpha waddled up to the still open door of Harry's room with Billy close behind him. Golder and the Putty Patrol are gathering to attack Angel Grove. Jason and the other Rangers stood from their transfigured chairs, which Harry then vanished to get them out of the way. Then we better head them off, guys. The Red Ranger said with determination in his voice. Right, the other 4 Rangers called before following him into the main room of the command center. Harry, Jason stopped for a moment, giving the wizard a firm look. If this Green Ranger guy shows up, we're probably gonna need your help if he's as strong as you said he is. Get your wand done as soon as you can, alright? Harry just nodded, refraining from rolling his eyes. Shouldn't be too terribly long at this point, Jason. I'll be along as soon as I can. As if he would have taken his time during a crisis situation. With a nod to Harry, Jason moved to stand with the rest of the Rangers. Alright guys, it's Morphin time. Mastodon. Pterodactyl. Triceratops. Saber-toothed tiger. Tyrannosaurus. The 5 briefly appeared in their spandex-like suits before being engulfed in light of their own colors that then flew through the air as Alpha teleported them to the location of Rita's forces. Ai, Alpha murmured as he shuffled back to one of the consoles and resumed repair work. Deciding to take the robot's lead, Harry got back to work on his wand, carefully pouring the molten metal of the Zapple apple into the hollow on each half of the wand and then tilting each piece to get an even coating as it cooled. He had a brief worry when he first started pouring that the liquid metal would set the wooden wand shell alight, but was more than a bit relieved when that didn't happen. While the metal cooled, Harry collected the strands from the pinoctopus vine and the singing squash and entwined them with some of the genie's webbing, securing the bundle at several places with some strands of his own hair. It was a rather tedious process since he couldn't use magic to tie his hairs in a loop around the bundle and his hair just wasn't quite long enough to make it an easy job otherwise. Finally, after several minutes of struggle, Harry had the solid core bundle prepared and gathered his other ingredients. Mixing together the sample of his BLD, the ground terror toadhorn, and the dust from Madame Woe's crystal focus, Harry was left with a thick brown paste that he spread over the now solid, if still a bit warm, metal that sat in the recesses of the wand shells. Harry was just reaching for the bundle of strands once more when the alarm in the command center started going off again. Ai. Harry! Come quick! Harry leapt up, fearing another intruder, and charged out into the main room with his hands glowing with magic. Alpha, what is it? His head darted left and right, searching for anyone that didn't belong, but found nobody there but himself and Alpha. The robot was dancing frantically from one foot to the other as he stared at the once again active viewing globe. Oh Harry, it's horrible. The Green Ranger showed up and he's thrown the other Rangers out of the Megazord. Say what now? Harry demanded as he let his magic recede again and jogged over to stand behind Alpha, watching the Rangers fight the same green-clad figure he had had a short encounter with earlier that day. Yeah, that's the guy all right. Is the Megazord all right? Alpha nodded his saucer-shaped head. Yes, I managed to teleport the Zords back to storage before the Green Ranger could take possession of it after the Rangers were ejected. But now they are all fighting on the ground and it looks like the Rangers are losing. What are we going to do? Indeed it did look bad. Harry watched as the Green Ranger practically danced amongst the Rangers, performing flips and kicks almost as if he was playing with them. As he watched, the evil Ranger locked his ankles around Trini's neck and hooked his arm around Billy's, leaving himself held horizontally between them. Before either could react, the Green Ranger twisted his body around, using Billy as a base and sending Trini flipping through the air as he planted his feet on the ground before throwing Billy as well. Merlin, Harry breathed as he watched the Rangers getting beaten. He's pulverizing them out there. Harry took a deep breath before his resolve hardened. He would need to speed things up now. He had hoped to have a bit of time to test his new wand after it was finished before jumping into battle, but it looked like the Green Ranger had once again taken that decision out of his hands. With a sense of determination he hadn't felt since the last days of the war against Voldemort, Harry marched back into his room and put the core bundle in place before resting the other half of the wand over it. Gingerly, Harry picked up the fully assembled wand, feeling lucky that the paste acted like a weak adhesive. It would help in holding it together until he could channel his magic into the new focus and, hopefully, fuse it back into one piece. His brow furrowing in concentration, Harry grasped the focus with both hands and began calling up his magic. The first thing he noticed was the heat as the wooden started warming in his hands while his magic churned within it. Next, just as the heat started to reach uncomfortable levels, the wand started to vibrate. As the next few seconds passed, Harry found he was unable to unclench his hands from the wand and felt his skin begin to burn as the vibrations from the wand became strong enough to translate to his hands. All the while, and completely unbeknownst to Harry, a fierce wind had whipped up around him, knocking the containers holding the last of his wand components off his desk and generally upsetting things around him. Alpha was first alerted to the phenomenon when a random bolt of electricity arced out of Harry's doorway and hit one of the pylons that were placed around the room. What in the world? Alpha began shuffling toward the door when another bolt arced out, nearly missing him and forcing him to take cover behind one of the consoles. Harry, what's going on? As the wand grew hotter and hotter, Harry felt like his hands were on fire where they were touching it. At this point the wand was pulling his magic all on its own despite a few attempts to stop the flow. Finally, with one last burst of magic, Harry felt the wand seal itself with a sucking sound before his hands unclenched, dropping the wand to the floor. Harry stumbled back a few steps and dropped to a sitting position on the ground, landing with a grunt. Alpha waited a few more moments before making his way into the room. Harry? Are you all right? Harry blinked as he looked up at the robot's visor, the flashing lights confusing him for a second before he shook his head. Yeah, Alpha. I'm fine. Harry said as he took a moment to examine his hands, rather surprised to find them to be whole and unburned. He then looked back toward his desk and spotted his attempted focus lying on the ground a few feet away. Without another word, Harry summoned it to his hand. The effect was immediate. The pointed tip of the baton-like wand let out a shower of bright red sparks as a surge of warmth shot up Harry's arms. He smiled. His wand was ready. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and 10-star 12 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.